Hey friends, tonight we're setting sail across the frigid Arctic waters with a crew whose lives revolved around the rise and fall of the bowhead whale. We're trading cozy beds for a narrow skin-covered umiak and modern creature comforts for bone-carved tools and seal oil lamps. Forget heated cabins and GPS. This is survival, reliance on community, and the slow routine of an Inuit whale hunt in the 1800s. So before you let your eyelids grow heavy, take a moment to like the video if you enjoy these quiet voyages, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is. I'm always curious who's drifting off alongside me. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a gentle fan for that soft hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're dressed in caribou skin boots and layered sealskin parkas. Your breath puffs in the frigid dawn air as you climb into the umiak, an open, whalebone frame covered in walrus hide. The hull rocks gently on an icy swell. Around you, 6 relatives tighten their grips on ivory oars. Ahead lies the blowing spout of a bowhead whale, today's prize, tomorrow's food, fuel, and shelter. This is daily life on a Inuit whaleboat. Daily life on a 19th century Inuit whaleboat. Do awaken long before sunrise, long before the faint glow of half-light. Your larger communal skin tent, reinforced by driftwood ribs, is already stirring. Beyond the entrance flap, the Arctic night sky pulses with stars reflected on ice floes. Your mother's low voice calls you by your childhood name, reminding you to bundle tightly against the cold. You slip your feet into worn sealskin boots, heavy with last season's bloodstains, and draw on mittens mended countless times. By the time you step onto the snow-packed shoreline, the other women have lit the seal oil lamps that will serve as lanterns throughout the day. Their pale flame flickers across bone-carved harpoons hanging from a rack inside the umiak. You breathe deeply, tasting the tang of lamp soot and ocean spray. Ahead, your father and uncles, 6 men in total, carry the heavy-skinned boat to the water's edge, their boots crunching in time with each breath. You help hoist the umiak's rounded ribs onto the narrow skids carved from caribou antler. Boat, nearly 20 feet long and 8 wide, creaks as the hides stretch taut. Each panel of walrus skin has been soaked, scraped, and dried under heavy stones, then stitched together with sinew. The seams are thick, uneven, but proven in countless hunts. You take a moment to trace the braided sinew of grandmother's handiwork, feeling the slight bump of every stitch. The umiak glides into the dark water. Your father holds the prow steady as the men climb in. You and your mother settle at midships, balancing small baskets of whalebone tools, ulu knives for slicing, toggling harpoon heads for anchoring, and small wedges for splitting blubber. Your father grips the starboard oar, his posture straight, shoulders braced against the weight of tradition. You and the other women raise the 2 central oars, poised to lend your strength in synchron. As the umiak drifts beyond the pack ice, you peer through the gloom. Your task today is critical, tending the blubber-rendering pot once a whale is secured. Without that oil, lamps won't burn, sled runners won't glide, and the entire community's winter stores falter. To your left, your older sister adjusts a tiny seal oil lamp hung from a carved bone hook, its glow dim, meant only to guide the women in near-total darkness. Your father points ahead, where a low spout of mist rises against the horizon. Men lean forward in unison, oars dipping into water half frozen along the keel. The slow rhythm echoes, each dip and rise of the oar, muffled by layers of fur against wind. Mist drifts over the umiak's gunnels, shimmering in the lamp's glow. The air is heavy with salt and breath, the sound of falling water blending with distant cracking of ice growlers. Within minutes, the whale spouts again, a plume of vapor. Wider this time, your father's voice, low and calm, issues instructions in Inuk. The men shift positions to move to the bow with harpoons, 2 to the stern, and 1 stays midships with a line. You watch, heart steady, as the small boat edges closer, no more than 20 paces from the whale's slow, deliberate path. Each man checks his gear, toggling heads bound with caribou sinew, ivory barbs sharpened on soapstone. Then your father whispers the signal, and 2 harpooners rise in unison, their silhouettes flickering in the lamp's light. From your low vantage, you see the first half strike, the whale's thick blubber with a dull thud, the toggle biting and beast surges, but the harpoon line, coiled neatly in baskets along the gunnel, holds fast. Waves shiver the hides beneath. You, the men, brace against the animal's strength, letting the umiak drift with the line. Inside the boat, you feel the tension through the floorboards. You clutch your mother's arm as the umiak lurches slightly. Your sister lowers the lamp to avoid splashes. Each of you grips the edges. One wrong move could upset the balance, flooding the boat. The whale's low bellow resonates through the water, only faintly audible over the lapping ice. Soon the creature tires, circling slowly. Your father nods, and 2 men move forward to pull the umiak alongside the immobilized whale. The others stand ready with long knives. At your mark, they heave the blade into the back of the vessel, cutting through blubber and muscle in wide practiced strokes. Blood stains the water crimson around the boat. You close your eyes against its smell. Your roll begins. You lift baskets of small wedges and knives, sliding them into the wound to pry apart blubber in thick slabs. Each piece is passed hand to the stern, where your mother and sister prepare them for the shore. The work is rhythmic. Slice hand, slice hand. The whale's body drifts slowly by the boat, tethered by lines to the umiak's bow. After a time that seems both long and brief, the whale's carcass is sufficiently drained of blubber. Men pull the empty skin closer to shore. You and the women slip onto pieces of ice floe to guide cuts into smaller sections. Torches of seal oil flame along the drifting ice, guiding expansion of the party. By lantern and torchlight you carry slabs to the snowbank. There, men slice them into thin strips and place them in a shallow iron pot secured to a tripod over a low flame. Hidden by rocks, as you watch the shimmering oil drip into a wooden bogulden. Translucent, your body shakes with cold and adrenaline. Every breath tastes like iron, but you hold still, knowing that each drop will light the community's lamps for weeks. This oil is life. Once the rendering pot is stoked, you help lift battered stone slabs back into the umiak, nesting tools and securing lines. The men haul the whale's bones and flesh onto sled boards brought earlier across the ice. These bones will become sled runners, bow drills, and tool handles. Nothing is wasted before dawn truly fades. You join the men in hauling the umiak and remaining equipment across the ice back toward camp. The sled boards crack under weight. The runners glide on seal grease applied earlier. You drag a small sled loaded with your basket of tools and a precious bowl of whale oil. Each step is deliberate, a dance between balance and purpose. Near the edge of the sea ice, your mother turns to you. Her face is lined with fatigue, but lit by pride. "You did well," she says, in a voice so quiet you almost miss it. You nod, too cold to speak, but inside you feel the steady warmth of belonging. As the first pale light stretches across the horizon, you catch sight of the lodge cluster where the women and children await. Smoke curls from the central cooking tent, mingling with morning mist. Today's share of blubber and oil will feed dozens. Bones, tools, and hides will equip the village for months. You pause a moment on the ice, looking back at the open sea, the realm of whales and danger and tradition. In that hush, you wonder how many more dawns you will greet in this way. How many seasons will bring new calves migrating north? And how many more hunts will your people endure before things change? Section 1 Recap. You rose before dawn in a communal lodge, bundled into sealskin and bone, then climbed into the umiak, an open whalebone frame covered in walrus hide. Under seal oil lamps and distant stars, you and your kin rode toward the spouting mist of a bowhead whale. Harpoons flew. The whale yielded its blubber, and you helped render oil to fuel your village's lamps. As dawn broke over drifting ice floes, you paused, wondering how many more hunts each season would bring and how many more you would live to see. Dawn's quiet aftermath when you finally stagger back into camp. The first gray light smooths the horizon. Snow-packed tents huddle together like beached whales, rising from the shore's ice like ghostly hulks. The flapping entrances bear the imprints of hurried feet, children scrambling toward the hearths at the heart of each structure. Inside, your uncles and brothers drag the heavy timbers of the umiak onto sled boards, pitching shoulder high against the chill wind. You join them uncomplainingly, hearts still thrumming from the hunt's adrenaline. Inside the central tent, a fire pit burns steadily. Women crouch around it, their breaths mingling in the smoky air as they ladle the night's whale oil into blubber-filled trays. You approach your mother, who dips a ladle into the shallow pool of molten amber, then passes it over a row of sealskin lamps. The oil glows with promising light for meager dwellings and heat to dry damp gear. Without a word, you kneel and refill the tiny lamps that will guide the village's children to school and the elders. Through evening prayers, a hush settles over the camp, as though the earth itself pauses after the hunt's noise. You feel it in the grooves of your muscles, and the pang in your ribs, a quiet toll of solitude that accompanies every victory over nature. The children scatter, chasing each other in rings around the lamp's glow, shrieking and tumbling in the snow. Their laughter is bright, but fleeting, echoing across the dunes of ice toward the silent sea, mending tools and bones while your sister sorts scraps of blubber for drying. You head to the tool rack where whalebone, harpoon heads, and ivory scrapers hang on leather thongs. Each tool has its own groove in your fingers. You retrieve a toggling head whose sinew lash has frayed in the hunt. By patting a strip of fresh caribou hide between your lips to moisten it, you begin weaving a new line. Your sister, always meticulous, inspects every knot, pulling tight to ensure it will not slip when paid out over the boat's gunwale nearby. Your uncle works a long, thin bone awl, resurrecting a series of holes that have closed under winters, cold in the umiak's hide. He presses the awl through the stiff walrus skin, creating neat perforations for fresh sinew. You assist him, steadying the hide and feeding him the bundles of braided sinew. Together, you stitch the whole back to its taut shape, mindful that even a single crack can invite a month's worth of freezing waves through the seams. At midday, when the Arctic sun hovers briefly before dipping again, your uncle marks the newly mended patches with slightly darker oil. The hide's pores drink it in, leaving an indelible outline around the stitches. He sets the umiak back on skids, and the men begin the arduous task of hauling it, each step rhythmic, each pull measured, the runners murmuring over packed snow. It is a labor of collective endurance without help. No one could move the boat, Alone. Communal feast and storytelling. Midday feasts are austere, yet communal affairs. Skewers of seal meat roast over small fires outside the tents, the slimmer, sweeter strips reserved for you and the watchers, while the heartier chunks go to the children. A pot of blubber broth simmers within the largest tent, bubbling beneath a low, smoky canopy. The taste is greasy and heavy, yet you savor each sip, its warmth spreading through your chest, loosening the ache in your shoulders and joints. After eating, the men rest their backs against driftwood frames, their breaths still labored but voices calm. Your father clears his throat, a signal that bastions of tradition are about to take shape in speech. He begins recounting the last season's hunts, the angles of the pack ice, the mist that fooled them into thinking whales' spouts were nearer, the sudden surge that snapped the first harpoon's line. Each detail is precise, delivered in a steady tone that makes the tale more ritual than memory. As the story winds on, the younger men lean forward, eyes hooded with fatigue, yet sharp with curiosity. They ask about weather signs, which stars position foreshadows shifting sea ice, which winds bring the migrating herds closer to shore. Your father names constellations and northern lights. Speaking of navigational lore passed down from ancestors, he picks at the smoky tent lining with a bone point, carving tiny symbols that match his words: lines for wind, curls for currents, triangles for danger. You sit beside your mother, who hums a lullaby under her breath, a song she sang to you as a child during long winter nights. Her voice is low, a thread of softness in this frigid land. You feel it weave through your memories. Nights spent studying seal oil lamps along narrow paths. Mornings when the sled runners gleamed with fresh frost. Lessons on how to judge the sea by the train of storm clouds on the horizon. Repairing snow, sleds, and skin clothing. As the feast trails off, attention turns to winter, another season of testing. Snow sled runners require fresh bone sharpening. You and two other women carry a set to a lean-to at the camp's edge. There, you set the runners against a low bench and work a section of river whalebone against sandstone until its edges gleam like stretched leather. Each pass of the stone files away nicks, creating a near-perfect angle for gliding. Frost forms on your eyelashes. Inside the same lean-to, your sister unpacks a bundle of cut hides, beluga, seal, and caribou. She will stitch them to create sets for the sled team. You pass her sinew threads and sharpened awls. The meeting of needle and hide sounds like distant rain on the sleds. You marvel at how these skins will transform into garments that shed wind and trap warmth within layers of fur. Ensembles will be ready long before the next hunt, proof that this community is never idle. Evening lamps and reflective silence as evening approaches. You return to the central lodge. The small lamps you filled hours ago are now burning bright, casting dancing shadows on the canvas walls. The cacophony of labor is replaced by a hush, each person absorbed in mending, planning, or quiet contemplation. Your father sits opposite you, carving new toggle heads for next season's harpoons, each evenly spaced notch marking the days until the ice melts again. You check your own mittens. The sealskin palms have begun to split from the hunt strain. With practiced fingers, you reweave the inner fur linings, ensuring no wind can slip through. You feel the faint pulse of warmth from the lamps in your hands, a gift of your own labor. Tonight, sleep will come early. The tents sag with the weight of lamp smoke, settling into the snow as if breathing. Outside, the sea's surface glints with newly formed ice, silent, waiting, indifferent to human triumphs and losses. You lie beside your siblings, warmed by shared bodies and layered furs. Your mother tucks the outer flap of the lodge closed, extinguishing the last lamp. In the dark, you recall the day's rhythms, the slight jiggle of the umiak's hull, the stinging cold of mending hides, the communal feast. The lanterns glow, each detail anchoring you to this unending cycle. As you drift towards sleep, you wonder, how will the shifting ice patterns alter next season's hunt? Will the whales migrate closer or further? And what new techniques might your people devise to survive the ever-changing Arctic? As you awaken beneath the heavy sealskin blankets, a pale glow filters through the lodge entrance. The Arctic dawn creeps in slowly, and you feel the dull ache in your muscles, proof that yesterday's hunt and mending labors were not in vain. Today, the umiak and sleds will carry the fruits of your labor into the village center, where the communal winter store awaits distribution. You slide your legs over the fur roll and stand, testing your balance in the narrow tent. Your mother, there's already stirring the seal oil lamps, their tiny flames flickering like distant stars. She hands you a small wooden bowl filled with warm blubber porridge, a mix of rendered oil, grated caribou meat, and water. The taste is greasy and bland, but you eat gratefully, knowing it will propel you through the day's final tasks. Outside, the men have harnessed the dog teams that will pull the sleds piled high with blubber slabs, ivory tools, and bone runners. You grab a pair of reins and help steady a lean husky, its coat shimmering in the dawn. The dog's warm breath puffs into the crisp air as the sled runners creak under the load. Beside you, your sister runs a bone scraper along the sled's wooden frame, smoothing rough edges that might catch in the snow. The journey to the village spans a few miles of packed ice and drift snow. As you travel, the hush of the northern landscape envelops you. occasional cracks in the ice ripple like distant thunder. The sleigh bells on the dog harnesses jingle softly, a gentle counterpoint to the wind whistling through your pockets. You glance at the umiak skidding behind on its own sled, its patched hull, a testament to human ingenuity against the sea's caprice. Upon reaching the cluster of lodges ringing the communal storehouse, you unload your sled. Each slab of blubber is carried inside by burly men who stack them in rows like dim lanterns awaiting carving. You help arrange the bone runners on shelves soon to be fashioned into new tools by village woodworkers. Women unpack the oil lamps, lighting them in a long line that guides families into the store. The warmth and glow feel almost sacred after the long journey. Inside, the elders convene to measure and distribute portions. You listen as your father and the head elder negotiate shares based on hunting contribution, family size, and need. The logic is simple but vital. No one goes hungry, and every hand that labored receives its dues. Children gather at your feet, eyes shining with anticipation for fatty porridges and toasty lamps. You slip away to watch them, remembering when you were their age, enthralled by the hunt's promise. Later, you return to the umiak's hide and bone to inspect your repairs. The seasonal thaw looms ahead, and soon the pack ice will break, dispersing whales farther out to sea. You run your fingers along the sinew seams, whispering a quiet blessing for their strength in withstanding sun and surf. Your sister ties a final knot at the bow, a knot she learned by watching your grandmother teach your mother decades ago. In that simple act, generations merge, past, present, and future bound by sinew and story. As dusk falls, the village gathers for a ceremonial dance around the freshly lit seal oil lamps. Drummers tap rhythms that mirror the oar strokes you practiced so long ago. You join the circle, shifting your weight in time to the heartbeat of the community. The flickering glow silhouettes wagons of hunting trophies, carved bowhead vertebrae, painted ivory tusks, and ornate bone toggles. Each artifact tells its own tale of survival, skill, and shared purpose. You pause beneath the night sky, its stars reflected in lamplit snow. You think back to the first spout that guided your umiak's bow, the frigid sting of harpoon recoil, the hush after the whale's surge. You recall the communal feast, the rhythmic stitching of hides, and the hush of children's laughter in wrinkled furs, each moment all demanding and profound wove together to create this tapestry of Arctic life. In the quiet that follows the dance, you realize the true legacy of your people, not just the oil that lights your lamps, or the tools that carve your sleds, but the unbroken chain of knowledge passed from parent to child. As storms shift the ice and whales alter their courses, it is this human thread woven through labor, ritual, and story that ensures survival. Tonight, as you drift into sleep beneath layered furs and lamplit glow, you understand that every hunt, every stitch, every shared portion in the storehouse is more than mere routine. It is a reaffirmation of community, resilience, and the quiet triumph of ordinary lives against an extraordinary world. End reflection. In the Arctic's relentless cold, it was not magic or myth that carried the Inuit through centuries of shifting. It was this daily dance of labor, adaptation, and shared ritual. And though the ice floes may fracture and the whales wander, each seam you stitch and each lamp you light binds past to present, ensuring that your people's story endures. You stand just outside the palace courtyard as dawn's first light softens. The red earth, the walls of Benin City rise behind you, massive mud ramparts crowned with wooden palisades, their dark silhouettes etched against the pale sky. From within, distant echoes of drums begin to ripple outward, a slow heartbeat that stirs the air. Today is neither a day of war nor harvest. Today is the day of the bronze plaque ceremony, an event that binds history, power, and ritual into one moment beneath the Oba's gaze. As you pass beneath the great arched gateway carved from Iroko wood, you glimpse the inner courtyard's expanse. Flagstones laid in concentric circles, great bronze heads standing sentinel on low pedestals, and lines of attendants bearing ornate banners and iron-tipped spears. The scent of palm oil and fresh millet porridge drifts from the kitchens to the east, mingling with faint clouds of incense burned overnight to honor ancestors. You smooth the front of your cloth, wrapper-worn but well-cleaned, knowing that any sign of fluster would be noticed by palace officials, and minor lapses here can carry consequences greater than simple reprimand. At the center of the courtyard, it stands a raised platform of carved ebony, its railings inlaid with copper wire forming stylized leopard motifs, the Oba's emblem of strength and cunning. On one side rests a collection of newly cast bronze plaques, thin sheets of metal, polished to a muted gleam, each embossed with scenes of courtly life, emissaries arriving from distant kingdoms, craftsmen at their forges, ancestral figures, seated upon stylized stools. These plaques, are not decorative alone. They are living memory, each one a deliberate record of deeds, both mundane and remarkable. Today's ceremony will see these plaques formally presented before the Oba, who will grant them their sacred charge. Once blessed, they will be affixed to the palace's inner walls, telling future generations of the exploits and values deemed worthy of remembrance. Your roll straightening the banners until the threads hang exactly vertical feels small, but you remind yourself that every detail, no matter how trivial it seems, contributes to the grandeur that legitimizes the OBA's rule. A ripple of excitement passes through the gathered crowd as the drums deepen into a rolling cadence. From the north pavilion emerges the first group of brass casters, the EI's guild dressed in layered cloth dyed deep indigo. Their faces are smeared with clay and soot from last night's casting fires. You watch as they bear the largest depiction of last year's expedition to reclaim a border village lost to raiding neighbors. The plaque shows sturdy spearmen marching beneath the Benin flag, shields raised, expressions set with unwavering determination. Each tiny figure is rendered with surprising clarity. The weave of cloth, the curve of a spear end. You wonder how the caster managed such finesse atop a trembling molten surface. Behind them follows the Oba's chamberlain, holding a bronze scepter shaped like a coiled crocodile, a sign of the Oba's overlordship of both land and river. The chamberlain steps carefully, ensuring the scepter never tilts, as if fear itself might spill from its bronze coils. You recall tales that the scepter is more than decoration. Some say that if it were to touch the ground before the OBA is seated, calamity would befall the kingdom. Others whisper that its bronze holds the spirit of a long-dead crocodile chief, lending mystical power to its bearer. Now the OBA emerges, flanked by his principal wives and high-ranking chiefs. His coral bead regalia gleams like dried blood in the early light, stacked in hundreds of strands around his neck and wrists. His cap woven with red velvet and studs of coral bears two stylized antelope horns, evoking both grace and watchfulness. As he ascends the ebony dais, the courtyard falls silent. Every whisper, every shifting foot, stops. Only the drums persist, droning like an unseen tide. The chamberlain bows low, presenting the crocodile scepter. The OBA accepts it with one graceful hand, nodding solemnly. Two priests step forward, each bearing a small bronze bowl filled with kola nuts and palm wine. They pour a libation at the Oba's feet, murmuring prayers to Hoye, the god of brass, acknowledging that these metals and their shapes are gifts from the divine world. The OBA whispers back a single phrase in the ancestral tongue, an invocation you do not fully understand but feel in your bones, a plea for the kingdom's prosperity and for the plaque's words to endure beyond mortal lifespans. Next, the brass casters step forward one by one. The first holds the expedition plaque aloft, its surface catching the firelight of braziers now lit around the dais. The OBA extends a hand over it, no touch, only the shadow of palm, and murmurs another phrase. The priests sprinkle crushed cowrie shells around the plaque's base, symbols of wealth and communication with ancestors. Then the chamberlain drapes a length of ivory white cloth over the plaque's top edge, signifying its placement on the palace wall. A hush follows, broken only by the distant scuffle of sandals. As each plaque is presented in turn, scenes of harvest processions, diplomatic gift exchanges, ancestral commemorations. The Oba's responses vary in murmur and gesture. Sometimes he inclines his head, sometimes he remains motionless, as if absorbing the image into the weight of his reign. Each plaque's story is a thread in the tapestry of Benin's identity, and you feel privileged to witness these threads being woven in real time. Finally, the last plaque emerges, a small, humble piece depicting palace women weaving coral beads into collars. The detail is delicate. Coils of beads lie on a wooden board, hands working the fine chords, facial expressions calm and focused. You catch the OBA's eye as he studies it. For a moment, his regal mask slips into something safari, a hint of pride in the kingdom's artisans and the women whose labor is often unseen in the annals of war and diplomacy. He places the palm of his hand over the final plaque center, then steps back. The chamberlain signals to drummers, and the rhythm crescendos into a triumphant roll. Smoke from the braziers swirls in the sunlight, and the attendant banners snap in the breeze, their leopard motifs dancing across the courtyard. The crowd exhales in unison, and you realize you, too, have been holding your breath. Yet even as the drums pound and the banners flutter, one question hovers at the edge of your mind. Centuries from now, will these very plaques still hang here, there, bronze surfaces dulled by time, their stories still legible to eyes that have forgotten the voices that first spoke them? The courtyard's drums have quieted to a measured pulse, and as the last braziers flicker, you're ushered inside the palace halls where cool shadows reign. Slate-tiled floors extend into dimly lit corridors lined with bronze plaques older than many living souls. Here, in these quiet galleries, each plaque hangs suspended from wooden pegs, an unbroken chain linking one ceremony to the next. You trace a finger along the rim of an older plaque, its once bright relief now softened by centuries of incense smoke, wondering how many times this ritual has unfolded in similar fashion. Your guide, the palace scribe, steps forward. Clad in soft indigo cloth and wearing a coral-studded cap, he speaks in hushed tones. These plaques are more than memory. They are law, theology, and precedent all at once. He gestures to a scene where the Oba meets with village fishermen offering carved ivory nets to secure his favor when disputes over river boundaries arose. This very plaque was cited, It reminded chiefs that loyalty and tribute flowed downstream, literally and figuratively. You pause before another image, a double portrait of Oba Ogwala and his mother, Ioba, seated side by side, their regal collars shimmering in the metal's faint glow. The plaque commemorates the founding of the Queen Mother Ufsa, landmark moment signaling women's elevated status in court affairs. Your guide nods. Her counsel tempered the Oba's decisions, and from this moment onward, the palace balanced masculine and feminine authority. You see how each hand rests upon the other's knee, a subtle symbol of mutual support. As you proceed, he recounts the technical marvel behind each casting. In a secluded chamber nearby, you glimpse a small furnace where the lost method unfolds. Mounded clay molds lie broken open, revealing hollow cavities still warm with embers of molten brass. Nearby, brass casters tend clay crucibles with long iron rods, coaxing globs of metal into graceful drips that form the detailed patterns of coats, spears, and animal motifs. The guide explains that master casters kept 3 fires stoked at once, one to melt, one to temper molds, and one to anneal the finished pieces. Timing is everything, he says. Delay a single pour by minutes, and the entire plaque can crack. In a side alcove, you find apprentice casters youths with faces carefully smoothing wax models before encasing them in clay. Their instructor murmurs advice: how to gauge wax temperature by touch, how a too rapid pour ruins the veins of leopard fur in relief, and how to prevent air pockets that might leave pits in the final bronze. You watch a boy dip a fine bronze stylus into melted wax, carving tiny dots to represent eyes on a gazelle's head. When the plaque emerges weeks later, those same eyes will gleam with uncanny precision, thanks to this apprentice's delicate hand. As the afternoon sun slants through narrow windows, you move toward the palace chapel, a hush-heavy room where ancestors' spirits are said to dwell. Here, a circle of plaques depicts key Obo-ancestor interactions. One shows Oba Ozalua receiving a heavenly orb from his forebear, symbolizing the divine mandate. Another shows him laying coral beads at a shrine, trusting the unseen forces to guide his reign. You kneel before these, feeling the weight of centuries of devotion, and wonder how many times supplicants have knelt in this same spot, their whispered prayers lost among the bronze echoes. As the afternoon sun slants through narrow windows, you move toward the palace chapel, a hush-heavy room where ancestors' spirits are said to dwell. Here, a circle of plaques depicts key orbit-ancestor interactions. One shows Oba Ozalua receiving a heavenly orb from his forebear, symbolizing the divine mandate. Another shows him laying coral beads at a shrine, trusting the unseen forces to guide his reign. You kneel before these, feeling the weight of centuries of devotion, and wonder how many times supplicants have knelt in this same spot, their whispered prayers lost among the bronze echoes. In the chapel's far corner sits the oldest known plaque fragment, only half intact, bearing the image of an Oba whose name has faded from memory. Its relief is coarse compared to later works. Figures are blocky, scenes simplified, yet this fragment's rawness underscores the evolution of Benin bronze art. From these humble beginnings, craftsmen refined their techniques, layer by layer, until the plaques near the courtyard dazzled with narrative richness, roused from contemplation by a distant gong. You follow your guide back to the inner courtyard as torchlight flickers on carved pillars. The plaques presented that morning now hang alongside their ancient predecessors, a continuum stretching through time. As evening choral chants drift across the courtyard, officials begin the solemn task of locking the courtyard gates. Banners are furled, drums stowed, and only the plaques remain silent yet vibrant in their testament. Before you leave, your guide offers one final insight. Remember, these plaques survive conquest, fire, and flood. They are not mere metal, but covenant made to ancestors and forebears that the memory of Benin's achievements will outlast any mortal reign. You nod, gazing upward at the rows of embossed scenes. Each plaque feels like a heartbeat in the palace's colossal form, a cantor's voice singing the kingdom's enduring song. As you step beyond the palace walls into the cool night air, the thought lingers when the last OBA is gone and the plaques, too, return to dust. Who will hear the silent metal whispers? Night has fallen fully over Benin City, and only the flicker of torches guards the palace's ancient rhythm. You find yourself once more in the bronze gallery, gazing at the plaques now glowing softly in torchlight. The events of the day feel distant, yet their metal echoes linger in the hush. Tonight, the final ritual awaits, the sealing of this year's commemorations into the palace's memory. A low chant drifts through the courtyard as priests emerge carrying woven mats and bronze bowls. They arrange the mats in a circle beneath the oldest plaques, their surfaces worn but resolute. Each priest holds a bowl of palm wine mixed with crushed kola nut, tokens of hospitality and strength. As you kneel just beyond the circle, you sense the boundary between past and present, dissolve ancestors and living stand, face to bronze-hardened face. The high priest steps forward, his voice unwavering as he intones the liturgy of renewal. He recounts each plaque's story from that morning, how the new brass castings survived the Oba's blessing, how the ancestral plaques endured the temple fires of old, and how both live together as guides for the living. With each recitation, he sprinkles wine from his bowl onto the mats, letting crimson droplets soak into the fibers as though sealing promises in the earth itself. When the liturgy concludes, the OBA appears on the raised dais once more, this time with a different scepter, a coiled serpent crafted in bronze, symbol of renewal and transformation. He lifts it high, and the gathered brasscasters, priests, and officials echo his nod with synchronized bows. The serpent scepter's shadow glides across the plaques, binding them in silent covenant. Your guide whispers that this moment marks the year's end and the beginning of those yet to come. He recalls how, in ages past, an Oba once failed to lead this ritual properly. The rain ceased, crops withered, and only a hastily summoned brasscaster restored the ceremony. Since then, no plaque presentation has faltered. No detail, no matter how minor, has slipped from memory. As you rise to leave, the Oba's voice carries over the courtyard, blessing the departed. May these images guard Benin's soul until the sun rests beyond the western gate. The courtyard answers with a low hum but human, part metal resonance, a final chorus that reverberates across the ramparts. Stepping beyond the outer wall, you pause under a sky ablaze with stars. You think of the plaques, meticulous, stubborn, and unyielding, and realize they embody more than art or record-keeping. They are the pulse of a people who refused anonymity, who wove every triumph and trial into a living tapestry. And in every line of each relief, you sense the heartbeat of generations who believed that stone and brass could outlast time itself. Reflection in Benin's bronze tradition. History is not written on fragile parchment, but cast in enduring metal. Each plaque carries a lifetime of labor, belief, and ceremony, ensuring that when voices fade and reigns end, the kingdom's story remains etched forever in bronze and bound by ritual promise. You arrive at the edge of Benin City just as dawns. Mist recedes, the river's surface rippling under pale light. A narrow path leads inland, flanked by low clay houses whose thatched roofs drip last night's rain. Something here feels quieter, an air of absence, as though you've stepped into a place once vibrant but since fallen silent. This was once the quarters of the Guild of Brass Workers, an enclosure humming with bellows, hammers, and the steady breath of apprentices learning the ancient art. Now only the faint echo of metal on metal lingers between the walls, following the old boundary posts, weathered wooden stakes burnt at the tip with last fire markings. You enter the abandoned courtyard. Overturned clay crucibles lie strewn across cracked flagstones, and fragments of cooling wax models peek from collapsed molds. The air smells of damp earth and old smoke. You can almost hear the rhythm of the forge, the hiss of molten brass poured into cavities shaped like leopards' heads and regalia collars. A faded sign carved into a crumbling beam reads House of Iejli Master Brotsuka. You run your fingers over the worn letters, imagining Iejli's steady hand guiding ladles of liquid metal, shaping each filigree detail that would one day adorn the palace walls. According to palace records, Iejli's workshop once employed dozens master casters, journeymen, wax modelers, mold repairs, finishers. Their combined labor wove the visible history of the Oba's court into bronze tapestries. You step into the main forge hall. The roof has collapsed in places, letting shafts of light strike the ashen floor. In one corner, a large furnace stands half intact, a dome of blackened clay ringed by iron supports. The hearth's floor is scored with grooves, where heavy iron tools were repeatedly dragged. Nearby, rusted tongs and chisels lie frozen in place, as if their owners simply stepped away one moment and never returned. Among the debris you find the remains of a brass plaque still warm to the touch, no more than a foot across, bare, a simple inscription for Oba Ingwada, Year of the Elephant. Most plaques are grand scenes. This one's modest scale suggests it commemorated a quiet tribute, perhaps a gift by a local chief rather than the palace itself. Its edges are rough where the furnace's heat warped the margins. You wonder who lost this piece and why it was left behind while the rest were carried off. A low murmur behind you makes you spin around. No one stands there, only a half-buried wooden bench and the ghostly shape of a second-floor balcony. According to oral tradition, the master's family once lived above the forge, their sleeping quarters overlooking the workshop floor. At night, the master would ascend the ladder to rest among his ancestral idols, listening to the dying embers and dreaming of the next dawn's creations. You climb the scorched beam that once supported the second floor and push gently against a collapsing plank. With a creak it gives way, revealing a small loft. Inside you discover a sealed chest made of Iroko wood, coral stains deep around its edges. A crude iron clasp holds it shut. Kneeling, you pry it open and find a ring of coral beads, several ivory combs, and the master's tools, a tiny bronze stylus, a bone awl, and a folded strip of leather containing charcoal sketches of plaque designs. One sketch shows a towering tree of life flanked by leopards, a design never seen in existing plaques. Beneath it, scribbled notes in ancient Ido script mention the underworld porticos and the living ancestors. These words hinted a grand project left unfinished, an artisanal vision that vanished when the guild itself disappeared. You settle on the loft's floor, unrolling the leather strip. The charcoal smudges under your fingertips reveal flourishes and annotations, where to drill tiny holes for suspended figures, how to blend red copper accents into yellow brass highlights, which ancestral spirits to invoke in the blessing ceremony. At the very end, a single line stands alone. Tomorrow we begin the final casting of the portal plaque. Why did that casting never occur? What calamity silenced this workshop and scattered its craftsmen as you descend back into the forge? Paul. The unanswered promise of the portal plaque echoes in your mind, a question poised between memory and ruin. You pause at the forge's threshold, the chest's contents still warm in your mind. The charcoaled sketch of the portal plaque beckons you onward, so you gather the scattered tools, stylus, awl, sketches, and set out to trace the footsteps of the lost brass workers. Your guide through this mystery is the palace scribe, who agreed to meet you at the edge of the city's abandoned quarter. By midday you find him leaning against a mossy post outside the guild's remains, peering at his own tattered scrolls. He spreads the parchment on a low stool, a rough map of Benin City's artisan districts. With a finger, he traces a route from the palace to your current location and onward to 2 nearby shrines. The guild's patrons were often linked to these shrines, he explains. When a master craftsman received a commission of great importance, he would consecrate his workshop to the shrine's deity, asking for guidance and protection. The portal plaque was meant for the shrine of Ottoman, god of the sea and secrets. He taps the spot where the shrine once stood. Its foundation stones lie buried beneath later constructions, yet some believe fragments of that shrine survive. You cloak yourself in your wrapper, adjust the leather scroll tube at your belt, and follow the scribe down narrow lanes toward the river's edge. The path narrows to a muddy track ringed by tall grasses. Overhead vultures wheel in the hazy sky. Somewhere ahead stands the old Ottoman shrine, though today's structures obscure its exact location. You step carefully over broken clay pots and tumbled bricks, remnants of an older city swallowed by time. At last, you come to a cluster of palm trunks encircling a stagnant pool where the water's oily sheen glints with reflected sun. Here, a handful of villagers routinely throw coins and knotted cloth into the pool's center, performing quiet rituals to placate the water spirits. You kneel at the water's edge, half expecting to glimpse bronze shards beneath the surface, but find only murky depths. Placing the sketch atop a rock, you ask the scribe, could the portal plaque have been cast here? Its materials consecrated in these waters? He nods gravely. It would not be unheard of. Brass workers sometimes cooled their castings in sacred pools to imbue metal with divine essence. Resolute, you slip off your wrapper's corner to bind your charcoal tools to a leather cord and wade ankle-deep into the water. With the stylus, you draw a rough outline of the Tree of Life sketch just beneath the surface, letting the ripples blur the lines. You whisper a request to Ottoman's spirit, reveal the plaque's fate, if only in memory's haze. The villagers' songs drift across the reeds, blending with your heartbeat, and for a fleeting moment, you imagine the water glowing bronze as long-buried metal stirs beneath. You withdraw your feet crestfallen, yet determined to pursue another lead. The scribe points toward a southern hamlet home to a once famous wax-caster clan whose lineage claims ties to Ayali's workshop. They held the molds before the master's hand shaped them, he says. If any record survived, they might hide here. An hour's dusty trek brings you to a community of polychrome houses painted with ochre and soot. Children dart between doorways. Elders sit on benches carving wooden masks. You inquire about the wax casters, and a stooped woman emerges, her head wrapped in indigo cloth. She leads you to a dimly lit hut lined with wooden shelves. There, amid clay figurines and coconut shell bowls, she reveals a small bundle, brittle sheets of palm leaf inscribed with Edo script. You gently unroll the leaves. The script speaks of day-to-day workshop logistics, orders placed, mold preparations, dated, payments rendered. Toward the bundle's end, one entry stands out. Day of the Blue Dawn, Master's furnace collapsed, portal project halted. Beneath it, a second entry, Apprentice Oe attempts reconstruction, brass coded with new ancestor rites. No further notes follow. The woman murmurs that the Master's health failed shortly thereafter. Oa fled the city, fearing palace wrath for his mistakes. Clutching the palm leaves, you wander back into the sunlight, pondering the furnace collapse. What caused it? A flaw in the mold, a shift in clay's temperature, a rival's sabotage. You decide to examine the furnace remains more closely. Returning to the forge hall, you crouch by the half-intact furnace dome. Its cracked clay reveals steel rods bent inward, as though an inner blast had warped them. You press fingertips to the fissures, of evidence perhaps of an explosion rather than mere collapse. Tiny chunks of blackened charcoal and rusted iron tools lie scattered around, splintered as if struck by force. As afternoon shadows lengthen, you piece together a tragic tableau. The master and apprentices worked tireless nights to complete the portal plaque, driven by reverence and ambition. But furnace failure, whether structural flaw or deliberate accident, molten brass roaring from its hearth, shattering clay walls and sending shards of hot metal across the floor. Apprentices raced for cover, some suffered burns. The master, perhaps wounded, ordered all to flee before the arbor's guards discovered the guild's failure. In the chaos, the bronze stylus and all were abandoned in the loft, the portal plaque's wax model left inside its mold. When the palace artisans never collected the finished work, the guild's spirit fractured, no new commissions, no repairs, and by season's end, the guild was no more. Your heart pounds as you imagine the panic, the heat, the inferno contained only by hastily thrown mats in prayer to Ottoman. The portal plaque, designed to stand as gateway between realms, became the trigger of a catastrophic blow that severed the guild's lifeline, and with it, the community of brassworkers, masters, journeymen, apprentices dispersed into exile or obscurity. As dusk falls, you gather the palm leaves and stylus rising to depart. You know the final piece of this story lies in tracking Oa's path beyond the city walls. If he truly fled, perhaps fragments of the genius lost workshop survive in distant quarters, yet the fissured furnace remains here, silent testimony to brilliance undone by a single, fateful moment. What became of Owen? Could he have completed the portal plaque in exile? Night's deep hush settles over the abandoned guild quarter as you return to the crumbling forge hall one last time. Torchlight splashes flickering shadows across the collapsed roof, and the fissured furnace stands as a silent sentinel to past calamity. In your satchel you carry the palm leaf log, day of the blue dawn. Master's furnace collapsed, portal project halted, and the charcoal sketch from Yale's chest. Both point to the apprentice Oa, whose flight may hold the final clue. You skirt the rubble toward the back exit, a low archway once used to hold finished plaques to the palace courtyard. The arch's keystone bears a faint stamp, the guild's emblem, two leaping leopards flanking a flame. You press your palm to the soot-blackened stone and quietly whisper a request: to find Oa's trail before it vanishes in the city's night. The scribe awaits you outside, holding a small oil lamp whose glow outlines his somber features. "I have news," he murmurs. "There was a sighting of a young brassworker in the eastern fishing quarters many moons ago." He hands you a slender reed, the city's informal courier known to slip between districts. Inside, a note reads, "Follow the river road until you see the moonlit shrine." There he waits. Despite the guild's desolation, the river road remains familiar. Narrow, packed earth bordered by palmettos and low mud walls. You follow its windings until the moon, swollen in silver, reflects off calm water. Ahead stands a small shrine fenced with woven reeds, its altar lit by a solitary oil lamp. You approach silently. Heart in your throat. At the shrine's foot sits a lean figure hunched over wax molds on a low wooden bench. Even by lamplight, you recognize the young apprentice's hands, delicate yet confident as they smooth the edges of a tiny wax mask. He does not startle as you step into the circle of light. Instead, he straightens and sets the stylus and all aside. "I was expecting you," he says in a voice both calm and weary. The flickering lamp reveals his face, soot-smeared eyes clear with determination. This is Oa, last scion of the Lost Guild. You kneel before him as he adjusts the lamp's wick. "You carry our past in that chest and log." He nods to your satchel, "But our future lies in this mask." He lifts the wax artifact, a small visage of a leopard, mouth open in silent roar. He explains that after the furnace blast, he tended the injured, buried the dead, then fled under cover of darkness. Without Ayeli's presence, the guild could not find favor, and its members scattered. Determined to preserve the craft, Owe made his way here, to the fisherman's quarter, where few sought palace approval. He envisioned a new workshop, one unbound by court politics, dedicated to simpler creations infused with ancestral spirit. Tonight, he works on the portal mask, a scaled-down trial of the original plaque's design. He intends it not for the OBA, but for the River Guardians, hoping to placate Olocon in gratitude for survival. "Every casting begins with hope," he says, dipping the stylus into molten wax. "But to complete it, we must face our failures." You unfold the palm leaf log and the palace sketch, showing him the original design. Owe studies each charcoal line, then traces his finger along the riverbank outline. "There's room here," he points, "if we adapt the plaque's motifs of life, leopards, underworld porticos, to this mask. We forge a bridge between guild and river spirits." He promises that if you assist him in casting this mask by sunrise, you become part of the guild's rebirth. You pause at the forge's threshold, the chest's contents still warm in your mind. The charcoaled sketch of the portal plaque beckons you onward, so you gather the scattered tools, stylus, all sketches, and set out to trace the footsteps of the lost brass workers. Your guide through this mystery is the palace scribe, who agreed to meet you at the edge of the city's abandoned quarter. By midday, you find him leaning against a mossy post outside the guild's remains, peering at his own tattered scrolls. He spreads the parchment on a low stool, a rough map of Benin City's artisan districts. With a finger, he traces a route from the palace to your current location and onward to two nearby shrines. The guild's patrons were often linked to these shrines, he explains. When a master craftsman received a commission of great importance, he would consecrate his workshop to the shrine's deity, asking for guidance and protection. The portal plaque was meant for the shrine of Olocon, god of the sea and secrets. He taps the spot where the shrine once stood. Its foundation stones lie buried beneath later constructions, yet some believe fragments of that shrine survive. You cloak yourself in your wrapper, adjust the leather scroll tube at your belt, and follow the scribe down narrow lanes toward the river's edge. The path narrows to a muddy track ringed by tall grasses. Overhead vultures wheel in the hazy sky. Somewhere ahead stands the old Ottoman shrine, though today's structures obscure its exact location. You step carefully over broken clay pots and tumbled bricks, remnants of an older city swallowed by time at last. You come to a cluster of palm trunks encircling a stagnant pool where the water's oily sheen glints with reflected sun. Here, a handful of villagers routinely throw coins and knotted cloth into the pool's center, performing quiet rituals to placate the water spirits. You kneel at the water's edge, half expecting to glimpse bronze shards beneath the surface, but find only murky depths. Placing the sketch atop a rock, you ask the scribe, could the portal plaque have been cast here? Its materials consecrated in these waters. He nods gravely. It would not be unheard of. Brass workers sometimes cooled their castings in sacred pools to imbue metal with divine essence. Resolute, you slip off your wrapper's corner to bind your charcoal tools to a leather cord and wade ankle-deep into the water. With the stylus, you draw a rough outline of the Tree of Life sketch just beneath the surface, letting the ripples blur the lines. You whisper a request to Olocon's spirit, reveal the plaque's fate, if only in memory's haze. The villagers' songs drift across the reeds, blending with your heartbeat, and for a fleeting moment, you imagine the water glowing bronze as long-buried metal stirs beneath. You withdraw your feet crestfallen, yet determined to pursue another lead. The scribe points toward a southern hamlet home to a once famous wax-caster clan whose lineage claims ties to Ayali's workshop. They held the molds before the master's hand shaped them. He says, if any record survived, they might hide here. An hour's dusty trek brings you to a community of polychrome houses painted with ochre and soot. Children dart between doorways. Elders sit on benches carving wooden masks. You inquire about the wax casters, and a stooped woman emerges, her head wrapped in indigo cloth. She leads you to a dimly lit hut lined with wooden shelves. There, amid clay figurines and coconut shell bowls, she reveals a small bundle, brittle sheets of palm leaf inscribed with Edo script. You gently unroll the leaves. The script speaks of day-to-day workshop logistics, orders placed, mold preparations, dated, payments rendered. Toward the bundle's end, one entry stands out. Day of the Blue Dawn, Master's furnace collapsed, portal project halted. Beneath it, a second entry, Apprentice Oe attempts reconstruction, brass-coded with new ancestor rites. No further notes follow. The woman murmurs that the master's health failed shortly thereafter. Oa fled the city, fearing palace wrath for his mistakes. Clutching the palm leaves, you wander back into the sunlight, pondering the furnace collapse. What caused it? A flaw in the mold, a shift in clay's temperature, a rival's sabotage. You decide to examine the furnace remains more closely. Returning to the forge hall, you crouch by the half-intact furnace dome. Its cracked clay reveals steel rods bent inward, as though an inner blast had warped them. You press fingertips to the fissures, evidence perhaps of an explosion rather than mere collapse. Tiny chunks of blackened charcoal and rusted iron tools lie scattered around, splintered as if struck by force. As afternoon shadows lengthen, you piece together a tragic tableau. The master and apprentices worked tireless nights to complete the portal plaque, driven by reverence and ambition. But furnace failure, whether structural flaw or deliberate accent, molten brass roaring from its hearth, shattering clay walls and sending shards of hot metal across the floor. Apprentices raced for cover, some suffered burns. The master, perhaps wounded, ordered all to flee before the arbor's guards discovered the guild's failure. In the chaos, the bronze stylus and all were abandoned in the loft, the portal plaque's wax model left inside its mold. When the palace artisans never collected the finished work, the guild's spirit fractured. No new commissions, no repairs, and by season's end, the guild was no more. Your heart pounds as you imagine the panic, the heat, the inferno contained only by hastily thrown mats in prayer to Olokon. The portal plaque, designed to stand as gateway between realms, became the trigger of a catastrophic blow that severed the guild's lifeline, and with it, the community of brass workers, masters, journeymen, apprentices dispersed into exile or obscurity. As dusk falls, you gather the palm leaves and stylus, rising to depart. You know the final piece of this story lies in tracking Oa's path beyond the city walls. If he truly fled, perhaps fragments of the genius lost workshop survive in distant quarters, yet the fissured furnace remains here, silent testimony to brilliance undone by a single, fateful moment. What became of Owen? Could he have completed the portal plaque in exile? Night's deep hush settles over the abandoned guild quarter as you return to the crumbling forge hall one last time. Torchlight splashes flickering shadows across the collapsed roof, and the fissured furnace stands as a silent sentinel to past calamity. In your satchel, you carry the palm leaf log. Day of the Blue Dawn. Master's furnace collapsed, portal project halted, and the charcoal sketch from Yale's chest. Both point to the apprentice Oa, whose flight may hold the final clue. You skirt the rubble toward the back exit. A low archway once used to hold finished plaques to the palace courtyard. The arch's keystone bears a faint stamp, the guild's emblem, two leaping leopards flanking a flame. You press your palm to the soot-blackened stone and quietly whisper a request: to find Oa's trail before it vanishes in the city's night. The scribe awaits you outside, holding a small oil lamp whose glow outlines his somber features. "I have news," he murmurs. "There was a sighting of a young brass worker in the eastern fishing quarters many moons ago." He hands you a slender reed, the city's informal courier known to slip between districts. Inside, a note reads, "Follow the river road until you see the moonlit shrine." There he waits. Despite the guild's desolation, the river road remains familiar. Narrow, packed earth bordered by palmettos and low mud walls. You follow its windings until the moon, swollen and silver, reflects off calm water. Ahead stands a small shrine fenced with woven reeds, its altar lit by a solitary oil lamp. You approach silently. Heart in your throat, at the shrine's foot sits a lean figure hunched over wax molds on a low wooden bench. Even by lamplight, you recognize the young apprentice's hands, delicate yet confident as they smooth the edges of a tiny wax mask. He does not startle as you step into the circle of light. Instead, he straightens and sets the stylus and all aside. "I was expecting you," he says in a voice both calm and weary. The flickering lamp reveals his face, soot-smeared eyes clear with determination. This is Oa, last scion of the Lost Guild. You kneel before him as he adjusts the lamp's wick. "You carry our past in that chest and log." He nods to your satchel, "But our future lies in this mask." He lifts the wax artifact, a small visage of a leopard, mouth open in silent roar. He explains that after the furnace blast, he tended the injured, buried the dead, then fled under cover of darkness. Without Ayeli's presence, the guild could not find favor, and its members scattered. Determined to preserve the craft, Oe made his way here, to the fisherman's quarter, where few sought palace approval. He envisioned a new workshop, one unbound by court politics, dedicated to simpler creations infused with ancestral spirit. Tonight, he works on the portal mask, a scaled-down trial of the original plaque's design. He intends it not for the OBA, but for the River Guardians, hoping to placate Ottoman in gratitude for survival. "Every casting begins with hope," he says, dipping the stylus into molten wax. "But to complete it, we must face our failures." You unfold the palm leaf log and the palace sketch, showing him the original design. Oe studies each charcoal line, then traces his finger along the riverbank outline. "There's room here," he points, "if we adapt the plaque's motifs, tree of life, leopards, underworld porticos, to this mask. We forge a bridge between guild and river spirits." He promises that if you assist him in casting this mask by sunrise, you become part of the guild's rebirth. You pause at the forge's threshold, the chest's contents still warm in your mind. The charcoal sketch of the portal plaque beckons you onward, so you gather the scattered tools, stylus, or sketches and set out to trace the footsteps of the lost brass workers. Your guide through this mystery is the palace scribe, who agreed to meet you at the edge of the city's abandoned quarter. By midday, you find him leaning against a mossy post outside the guild's remains, peering at his own tattered scrolls. He spreads the parchment on a low stool, a rough map of Benin City's artisan districts. With a finger, he traces a route from the palace to your current location and onward to nearby shrines. The guild's patrons were often linked to these shrines, he explains. When a master craftsman received a commission of great importance, he would consecrate his workshop to the shrine's deity, asking for guidance and protection. The portal plaque was meant for the shrine of Ottoman, god of the sea and secrets. He taps the spot where the shrine once stood. Its foundation stones lie buried beneath later constructions, yet some believe fragments of that shrine survive. You cloak yourself in your wrapper, adjust the leather scroll tube at your belt, and follow the scribe down narrow lanes toward the river's edge. The path narrows to a muddy track ringed by tall grasses. Overhead, vultures wheel in the hazy sky. Somewhere ahead stands the old Ottoman shrine, though today's structures obscure its exact location. You step carefully over broken clay pots and tumbled bricks, remnants of an older city swallowed by time. At last, you come to a cluster of palm trunks encircling a stagnant pool where the water's oily sheen glints with reflected sun. Here, a handful of villagers routinely throw coins and knotted cloth into the pool's center, performing quiet rituals to placate the water spirits. You kneel at the water's edge, half expecting to glimpse bronze shards beneath the surface, but find only murky depths. Placing the sketch atop a rock, you ask the scribe, could the portal plaque have been cast here, its materials consecrated in these waters? He nods gravely. It would not be unheard of. Brass workers sometimes cooled their castings in sacred pools to imbue metal with divine essence. Resolute, you slip off your wrapper's corner to bind your charcoal tools to a leather cord and wade ankle-deep into the water. With the stylus, you draw a rough outline of the tree of life sketch just beneath the surface, letting the ripples blur the lines. You whisper a request to Olok in spirit. Reveal the plaque's fate, if only in memory's haze. The villagers' songs drift across the reeds, blending with your heartbeat, and for a fleeting moment, you imagine the water glowing bronze as long-buried metal stirs beneath. You withdraw your feet crestfallen, yet determined to pursue another lead. The scribe points toward a southern hamlet home to a once famous waxcaster clan whose lineage claims ties to Ayeli's workshop. They held the molds before the master's hand shaped them, he says. If any records survived, they might hide here. An hour's dusty trek brings you to a community of polychrome houses painted with ochre and soot. Children dart between doorways, elders sit on benches carving wooden masks. You inquire about the waxcasters, and a stooped woman emerges, her head wrapped in indigo cloth. She leads you to a dimly lit hut lined with wooden shelves. There, amid clay figurines and coconut shell bowls, she reveals a small bundle, brittle sheets of palm leaf inscribed with Ido script. You gently unroll the leaves. The script speaks of day-to-day workshop logistics, orders placed, mold preparations, dated, payments rendered. Toward the bundle's end, one entry stands out. Day of the Blue Dawn. Master's furnace collapsed. Portal project halted. Beneath it, a second entry. Apprentice OA attempts reconstruction. Brass coated with new ancestor rites. No further notes follow. The woman murmurs that the master's health failed shortly thereafter. Oa fled the city, fearing palace wrath for his mistakes. Clutching the palm leaves, you wander back into the sunlight, pondering the furnace collapse. What caused it? A flaw in the mold, a shift in clay's temperature, a rival's sabotage. You decide to examine the furnace remains more closely. Returning to the forge hall, you crouch by the half-intact furnace dome. Its cracked clay reveals steel rods bent inward, as though an inner blast had warped them. You press fingertips to the fissures, evidence, perhaps, of an explosion rather than mere collapse. Tiny chunks of blackened charcoal and rusted iron tools lie scattered around, splintered as if struck by force. As afternoon shadows lengthen, you piece together a tragic tableau. The master and apprentices worked tireless nights to complete the portal plaque, driven by reverence and ambition. But furnace failure, whether structural flaw or deliberate act, sent molten brass roaring from its hearth, shattering clay walls and sending shards of hot metal across the floor. Apprentices raced for cover. Some suffered burns. The master, perhaps wounded, ordered all to flee before the Oba's guards discovered the guild's failure. In the chaos, the bronze stylus and all were abandoned in the loft, the portal plaque's wax model left inside its mold. When the palace artisans never collected the finished work, the guild's spirit fractured. No new commissions, no repairs, and by season's end, the guild was no more. Your heart pounds as you imagine the panic, the heat, the inferno contained only by hastily thrown mats in prayer to Olakon. The portal plaque, designed to stand as gateway between realms, became the trigger of a catastrophic blow that severed the guild's lifeline. And with it, the community of brassworkers, masters, journeymen, apprentices dispersed into exile or obscurity. As dusk falls, you gather the palm leaves and stylus, rising to depart. You know the final piece of this story lies in tracking Oa's path beyond the city walls. If he truly fled, perhaps fragments of the genius lost workshop survive in distant quarters. Yet the fissured furnace remains here, silent testimony to brilliance undone by a single fateful moment. What became of Oa, and could he have completed the portal plaque in exile? Night's deep hush settles over the abandoned guild quarter as you return to the crumbling forge hall one last time. Torchlight splashes flickering shadows across the collapsed roof, and the fissured furnace stands as a silent sentinel to past calamity. In your satchel, you carry the palm leaf log. Day of the Blue Dawn. Master's furnace collapsed. Portal project halted, and the charcoal sketch from Ayala's chest. Both point to the apprentice Oa, whose flight may hold the final clue. You skirt the rubble toward the back exit. A low archway once used to hold finished plaques to the palace courtyard. The arch's keystone bears a faint stamp, the guild's emblem, to leaping leopards flanking a flame. You press your palm to the soot-blackened stone and quietly whisper a request, to find Oa's trail before it vanishes in the city's night. The scribe awaits you outside, holding a small oil lamp whose glow outlines his somber features. Have news, he murmurs. There was a sighting of a young brass worker in the eastern fishing quarters many moons ago. He hands you a slender reed, the city's informal courier known to slip between districts. Inside, a note reads, "Follow the river road until you see the moonlit shrine." There he waits. Despite the guild's desolation, the river road remains familiar. Narrow, packed earth, bordered by palmettos and low mud walls. You follow its windings until the moon, swollen and silver, reflects off calm water. Ahead stands a small shrine fenced with woven reeds, its altar lit by a solitary oil lamp. You approach silently, heart in your throat. At the shrine's foot sits a lean figure hunched over wax molds on a low wooden bench. Even by lamplight, you recognize the young apprentice's hands, delicate yet confident as they smooth the edges of a tiny wax mask. He does not startle as you step into the circle of light. Instead, he straightens and sets the stylus and all aside. "I was expecting you," he says in a voice both calm and weary. The flickering lamp reveals his face, soot-smeared eyes clear with determination. This is Oe, last scion of the Lost Guild. You kneel before him as he adjusts the lamp's wick. You carry our past in that chest and log. He nods to your satchel, but our future lies in this mask. He lifts the wax artifact, a small visage of a leopard, mouth open in silent roar. He explains that after the furnace blast, he tended the injured, buried the dead, then fled under cover of darkness. Without Iyali's presence, the guild could not find favor, and its members scattered, determined to preserve the craft. Oe made his way here, to the fisherman's quarter, where few sought palace approval. He envisioned a new workshop, one unbound by court politics, dedicated to simpler creations infused with ancestral spirit. Tonight, he works on the portal mask, a scaled-down trial of the original plaques designed. He intends it not for the Oba but for the River Guardians, hoping to placate Olokin in gratitude for survival. Every casting begins with hope, he says, dipping the stylus into molten wax. But to complete it, we must face our failures. You unfold the palm leaf log and the palace sketch, showing him the original design. Oe studies each charcoal line, then traces his finger along the riverbank outline. There's room here, he points. If we adapt the plaques, motifs, tree of life, leopards, underworld porticos to this mask, we forge a bridge between guild and river spirits. He promises that if you assist him in casting this mask by sunrise, you become part of the guild's rebirth. You set to work, or what fills a simple clay mold with wax, layer by layer, while you crimp the edges to ensure airtight lines. He explains the ritual. The mold must rest overnight beneath the altar's oil lamp, its flame warding off insects and symbolizing memory's light. At dawn, you will carry the mold to a secret furnace hidden beneath the fishermen's boats, where heated stones will coax molten brass into the cavity. As stars wheel above, you'll help inscribe Oe's prayer into the mold's base. May craftsmanship rise in you from ash and bronze, guided by ancestors' touch. When the wax mask lies complete, Oe places it beneath the lamp, its features gleaming softly in candlelight. You feel its presence, both promise and homage, before departing. You ask Oa, will this mask truly restore the guild's name? He smiles, weary but hopeful. The guild is more than fire and mold. It lives in our hands, our hearts, and stories we share. Tonight, we cast not just brass, but renewal itself. With dawn's first glow, you and Oa carry the mold toward the hidden furnace. Though the guild's grand halls remain silent, its spirit pulses anew in this humble mask. And as molten brass flows into the mold, you realize that sometimes history's most momentous revivals begin not with grand plaques, but with the steady determination of a single artisan confronting failure and forging from it a fresh promise. Stand at the western gate of the royal palace just before sunrise, the air cool and heavy with incense. Beyond the gate, an open courtyard stretches toward the Oba's throne hall. Its pale clay walls glow rose gold in the early light. Today marks a monthly court procession, a carefully choreographed display of rank, ritual, and hierarchy that binds Benin's nobility to their sovereign. As you slip through the low entrance, you sense the palace itself awaiting its grand reawakening. First to arrive are the palace heralds. Their voices low but clear as they call out each arriving faction. Their calls echo off the stucco walls. An edgy of Udo Eas Vegabin, chief brasscaster of the Queen's Hall. Each title is met with a muted fanfare from distant corners, drums, clappers, or flutes hidden behind lattice screens. You count 15 distinct calls before the noble contingents appear, dukes, bishops, military chiefs, and heads of artisan guilds all converging along the central path you follow at the procession's edge. Noting the strict order, the low officials on foot, hands clasped respectfully across their chests. Higher lords on horseback, their mounts caparisoned in dyed cloth and bronze bells. The half-dozen ivory tiara council members bearing ivory staffs carved with ancestral figures. And finally, the ivory stool-bearers who carry the Oba's portable throne, its legs carved into leopards, its surface polished to a deep black sheen. At the heart of the procession rides the Arba's own retinue, lil attendants bearing his parasol, a round canopy of dyed silk fringed with crocodile hide tassels. Its muted green and burnt crimson panels ripple in gentle breeze, sheltering the OBA from both sun and prying eyes. You glimpse the OBA's sandal-hemmed feet upon the ivory stool, his legs draped in layered wrappers dyed deep indigo. He moves with barely perceptible nods, acknowledging each greeting without breaking the procession's steady pace surrounding him. Dignitaries step carefully, adhering to strict court etiquette. You note 3 key rules. Greet without eye contact. Lower your gaze at precisely the moment your title is announced. Then lift it only once you hear the Oba's response. Maintain even spacing. Too close, and you risk presumptuous familiarity. Too far, and you insult the Oba's generosity. Each step measures roughly a spear's length from neighbor to neighbor. Silence is respect. Speak only when spoken to, and never gesture with the left hand, considered unclean. Even the flutter of fans must follow precise rhythms. As the lines converge toward the throne hall's entrance, you observe a minor breach. The Izan Duke, proud, young, and known for his impatience, steps forward. As his name is proclaimed, forgetting to lower his eyes. Instantly, a palace guard raises his staff, striking the ground with a hollow thud. The Duke freezes, bends the required 90 degrees, and only then continues. A hush falls over the courtyard as every official recalibrates their steps, as though testing the boundaries of permissible boldness. You use this pause to examine the attendants' attire. Noble wrappers boast broad stripes of faded crimson and parchment cream, interwoven with threads of precious brass. Beneath them, ankles and wrists display fine coral bracelets, gifts from the Orber at birth, worn daily as reminder of royal favor. Even the guards wear subtly dyed cloth. Olive wrappers trimmed with burnt ochre, their shields scratched but meticulously oiled each morning. Now the Orber's stool emerges before the throne hall's carved door, its ebony surface embedded with ivory inlays depicting lineage scenes, a falcon guiding a canoe, leopards stalking sacred groves, and a crowned head glimpsed through palm fronds. As the stool is lowered and polished attendants step behind columns, the OBA stands, raising his ivory staff. A single gong resonates, its pitch both solemn and full of promise. You approach the threshold, invited to witness the closed-door ceremony. Beyond awaits the inner hall where only the highest-ranking nobles may enter. The doors swing shut with a resonant boom, sealing the courtyard in contemplative silence. The city outside stirs to life, but here, time pauses for ritual and respect. What secrets and delicate negotiations transpire behind those carved doors? You linger by the sealed doors, feeling the stone thresholds smooth chill under your sandals. Beyond lies the inner audience chamber, accessible only to those bearing the ivory staff, the Oba's closest counselors, on the guild chiefs whose expertise ensures palace needs are met. Though forbidden to enter, you've observed enough to sketch its outline. Narrow windows high on the walls, lattice-carved screens filtering dawn light onto polished floors, low benches where ministers rest their staffs, and at the far end, a raised dais with the Oba's throne, a larger, more ornate stool set beneath a canopy of woven silk and leopard pelt. After what feels like an age, the doors creak open. The Oba steps out alone, footsteps silent on the beaten earth. His gaze sweeps the courtyard, and you notice a shift in air courtiers bow deeply. Attendants huddle protectively around the ivory stool, and the OBA inclines his head twice, once in acknowledgement and once in farewell. The ceremony is concluded. The procession disperses. Your guide, the palace herald, strides forward. He wears no soldier's cuirass but carries the Oba's seal's small brass plates bearing the royal crest. He halts before you, nodding curtly. The OBA requests your presence at the Hall of Dispatches, he says. Your insight on guild matters is needed. Surprised by this rare invitation, you follow him along a different path, narrower, quieter, flanked by ivory columns carved with ancestral figures. Voices drift through side chambers, an envoy from Oyo checking tribute records, a trader petitioning for safer river passage, the Queen Mother's handmaidens arranging fragrant sprays of calendula and clay bowls. The Hall of Dispatches, you recall, serves as the palace's administrative hub here. The OBA and his prime ministers receive reports, issue decrees, and direct the city's daily workings. The hall's entrance is framed by twin bronze plaques, one depicting a leopard hunt, the other a gathering of chiefs around a fire. You step inside, seating yourself on a low mat behind a braided rope barrier. The Oba sits cross-legged on the dais, his large stool draped in crimson cloth. His ivory staff rests upright beside him. At his left, the EIA's prime minister examines scrolls of iron-weight tallies. At his right, the chief brasscaster fingers a miniature bell, weighing its length and tone. A hush falls as the herald announces your topic. Casting capacity of the guild's new furnace. You clear your throat and present your observations. The original guild furnace's dimensions, clay composition, and recent cooling rituals at the river shrine. The brasscaster nods at your use of sacred water, while the IIS jots notes with a slender-bone stylus. But the OBA raises a hand, halting further detail. His voice is quiet but firm. The palace seeks to produce 10 leopards annually for donor ceremonies. Our new furnace must outmatch the old guild's. How will your design ensure consistency in alloy and finish? You pause, aware that your answer may determine future guild structures. You suggest combining local copper with trace tin from the northern mines, an idea gleaned from trade records, and propose a multi-chambered furnace to regulate heat, a primary hearth for melting and a secondary chamber for annealing, where crafted pieces cool slowly under olive wood ash. The Oba's narrowed gaze shifts to the brasscaster, who murmurs approval. Such annealing prevents brittle casting faults. Satisfied, the Oba leans back. Proceed, he commands. Commission the new design, and ensure production before the next New Yam festival. At that signal, attendants lower the barrier, signaling the hall's dismissal. You bow deeply and slip away, heart racing with both relief and resolve. Outside, the courtyard pulses with renewed purpose. Guild craftsmen hurry past, carrying clay, pellets and charcoal ready for trial firing. An ivory carver sets up scaffolding on a new column. Farmers deliver tart yams for palace stores. Everything hums with activity embedded in centuries of ritual, yet adaptable to new demands. Later you find the EIS near the palace gardens. He unrolls a small scroll detailing resource allocations, copper ingots from northern caravans, firewood quotas from royal granaries, and the delicate schedule for purification rites before furnace. "Lighting, we trust your oversight," he says. "May Olokin's spirit guide each flame as dusk settles." You return to the old guild quarter to oversee the furnace's initial assembly. Apprentices clear rubble while master carpenters shape-reed molds for insulation. You watch as clay walls rise around iron frames. Then pause to recall the procession's disciplined precision, the bowing, spacing, silent deference. Sand marvel that such order extends even to metal fires. And ash dot the day closes as you apply the final coat of lime, plastered to the furnace's outer surface. In the flickering lamplight, its pale walls shimmer like ivory. Tomorrow, you'll light the first ceremonial fire after the proper cleansing chants, the pouring of libations, and the sweeping of straw mats. That is when the original guild's spirit, both fallen and reborn, will truly awaken. But tonight, as you coil coals around the hearth space, one question simmers in your mind. In a kingdom built on ritual order, can innovation coexist with tradition without risking either? You arrive before dawn, the sky an indigo hush pierced by a single bright star above the river. The new furnace stands silent but ready, its whitewashed walls bearing the ober's seal painted in faded crimson. Apprentices kneel in a half circle, each holding a small clay bowl of purified water from the sacred river. A master drummer begins a soft rhythm on a leather drum, its pulse deep and steady. First, the purification rite. You dip a leaf brush into the clay bowl and trace circular patterns around the furnace's arched mouth, whispering the words learned from Yehaley's palm leaf guide, "By river's flow and ancestors' breath. May flame on a life and legacy." 2. Apprentices swing incense burners, the sweet smoke curling in the lantern light. At the furnace's base you lay a thick bed of charcoal, then add split logs of ironwood, chosen for even burn and minimal spark. As the drumming builds, the arbor's herald proclaims the official lighting. A young apprentice carries the flame from the palace hearth, slowly sputtering torch of beeswax and palm fiber. He enters the circle, bows 3 times, then places the torch against kindling. A hiss, a flare, then steady orange glow in the hearth's mouth. You step forward with the chief, brass caster, and pour the first offerings. Ground white shell as a tribute to Olokin's favor, and a pinch of crushed indigo leaf for creative clarity. The flames leap, rising to lick the furnace's vaulted roof hand. You feel the clay pulse with heat dot in the side chamber. Apprentices prepare metal charges, copper ingots weighed precisely, tin bars cut to exact proportions, and small bits of palm oil serving as flux. You confirm ratios: 10 parts copper to 1 part tin while the drumming slows to a measured heartbeat. Outside, the Orba and court representatives stand in respectful circles, watching the rituals progress. An hour passes as the furnace breathes. Logs collapse into embers, and charcoal flames lick the clay arch until the temperature reading on a slender iron probe registers white heat. The master caster nods and signals for the crucible. 2 apprentices lift a heavy clay pot filled with metal bars and gently lower it on the ember bed. The crucible's surface glows dull red under the fuel's roar. Inside the chamber, you help center a second, smaller crucible beneath the clay nozzle. This will capture the molten alloy when it flows. Oa's apprentice stands ready at the nozzle's tap, basin poised below. Between you and him, the archaic pulse of furnace bellows, low wheeze followed by sudden rushes of oxygen. Soon you see the first droplets of molten brass fall into the nozzle, filling the receiving crucible with a gentle hiss. As the chamber brightens, you glimpse the Orba stepping closer, his silent presence a reminder of palace expectations. Apprentices hold shields of hammered bronze to reflect heat away from bystanders. You scoop a small ladle of liquid brass and test its flow. Smooth, viscous, a soft glow like captured sunlight. "Perfect," you murmur, and the chief caster grunts in approval. Down comes the true test. The mask mold created earlier, inscribed with ancestral prayers. You carry it in gloved hands across the yard, heart pounding. The mold's seams are sealed with thin clay slip. You position it beneath the crucible's spout, then give the nod. Molten brass cascades into the mold, filling every delicate contour. A hush falls as the alloy surges. Then the chorus of drumming fades into respectful silence. Minutes later, you slip the mold aside, allowing it to cool beneath palm fronds. The OBA steps forward, bending to inspect it. His ivory staff thumps gently on the earth. He raises a finger to the mold's side, where a faint leafy motif and leopard's eyes shine with brass's gleam. After a long moment, he touches the mold. With reverence, "So shall our traditions endure, shaped by fire, guided by hand." In that quiet dawn light, you see more than molten metal in that mask. You see a living bridge between ancient rites and evolving craft, between palace pageantry and humble innovation. The apprentices' faces, illumined by embers and sunrise, reflect the furnace's glow and the ober's satisfaction. You realize that in Benin's ordered world of protocol and procession, the true heart of the court lies in these steady, measured acts of renewal. As the mask cools, you ask the chief caster, will they remember this new forge as they do the old? He smiles, tearing clay from the mask's edge. History is made in every casting. Today, we add a new chapter. You watch the apprentices gently free the brass from its earthen cradle. The leopard mask emerges, cheeks smooth, eyes bright. Soon it will be polished and placed on the palace altar, another piece in the royal procession of power and tradition. And you understand. Ceremonies conclude, fires die down, and processions disperse, but the quiet work of craft endures, binding past to present and shaping the stories yet to be told. You awaken before the first morning gong, a thin shaft of light slipping through the carved wooden shutters of your small servants' quarter. The hut you share with 5 others sits just beyond the palace walls, its mud floor strewn with straw mats and a single low bench. Already you smell smoke from the palace hearth and hear distant murmurs as attendants prepare for the day's rituals. Today, like every day, you will move unseen behind the grandeur of court, ensuring each ceremony unfolds without a single misplaced jar of palm oil or missing stool. First, the morning ablutions. You and your fellow servants fetch water from the nearby well, carrying 2 clay jugs balanced on a slender pole across your shoulders. The well's bucket is half filled with cool, clear water by the time you arrive, the wooden pulley creaking with familiar rhythm. You fill your jug, lower the bucket, and rest for a moment on the well's rim, listening to the palace drums beginning their dawn cadence. Then you return, water sloshing gently, careful not to spill a single drop. Back at quarters, you pour water over a rough stone basin to rinse away last night's ash and sweat. Your wrapper, coarsely woven brown cloth, dries, stiff from the night's dust, but you pat it smooth and rewrap it around your waist. Over your shoulder you sling a small leather satchel containing your daily tools, a wooden comb carved with simple geometric patterns, a small iron knife for trimming cloth, a length of braided palm cord for tying bundles, and a cloth pouch holding a few kola nuts. Your only breakfast until midday. Before you step into the palace courtyard, you tie your hair back with a strip of dyed linen and tuck the comb into your wrapper waistband. You think of the palace's morning offering, freshly pounded yams and ripe plantains, presented to the ober's ancestors, and your part in it, carrying platters, lighting incense, and clearing away spilled grain. Your heart tightens at the memory of last week's mishap, when a slip of the platter sent a cascade of yams across the court, forcing you to stoop in front of the Eos's footman to gather each tuber before the Aba's 4th morning salute. You learned that bowing and apologizing could restore favor, provided you did so before the courtyard crowd had dispersed. As you cross the threshold into the palace proper, you pass through 3 gates: the Sentinel's Gate with its painted bronze reliefs, the gilded timber gate bearing ivory studs, and finally the low archway that leads into the inner quadrangle. Here, servants move in tight ranks along the outer colonnade, retrieving incense burners, water basins, and ceremonial wrappers from storerooms. You step aside to let a high-ranking oboist pass his music staff. Cradled under one arm, he nods curtly in your direction. Your first duty: prepare the hall for the ober's breakfast audience. You enter the stone-floored chamber where ivory stools rest on a central mat. Faint smoke trails from last night's brazier. You've set about clearing ashes, fanning the embers, until only glowing coals remain. Then you fetch fresh charcoal from the granary store, adding it layer by layer to the brazier. Soon a soft warmth radiates through the hall, and you hang a small bronze kettle from a carved wooden hook over the embers. The kettle's handle creaks as you pour water to boil for the ober's morning tea, a bitter leaf infusion meant to awaken both senses and spirit. While the water heats, you move to the storeroom beneath the dais to retrieve yams, plantains, and bowls of palm oil. You arrange them on lacquered wooden trays. Mindful of protocol, the largest plate goes closest to the dais's center. Smaller bowls flank it symmetrically. Each item must be placed with exacting precision, off by your fingers, with risks drawing a reprimand from the palace steward. A murmur arises as the ober's morning procession nears. You hear distant calls, "Ober," and the soft flutter of the parasol's fabric. You step aside, setting the trays against the dais before retreating to paces. A hush falls. The OBA enters, seating himself upon the ivory stool. Attendants pour tea and distribute platters. You remain at attention, eyes lowered, waiting for the signal that breakfast has concluded. A single nod from the EIAs, then the ober waves a handkerchief, and you and your fellow servants sweep forward to retrieve empty dishes, wrap leftover offerings for the royal hound, and extinguish the brazier's embers. Next, the ober's garments must be prepared for the day's public audience. You follow behind the royal dresser, carrying folded wrappers of indigo and crimson. The dresser selects each piece in turn, draping it over the ober's shoulders with deft fingers. You hold the ends taut, smoothing fabric to remove creases. Your pteric palms feel the rich weight of dyed cloths, some woven with fine brass threads to catch the light, others simply worn and faded from decades of use. Again, every fold carries meaning. The first fold must align with the oba's left shoulder to invoke ancestral blessings. The second fold crosses at the chest, symbolizing unity between ruler and people. As the oba inspects his reflection in a polished bronze mirror held by the dresser, you lean back, gathering stray fibers and adjusting the palace steward's scroll case. You recall that in childhood, palace pages once taught you the names of each brass plaque on the walls. Now you know every design by heart, but will never possess the right to claim them as your own. Your final task before the midday meal: tend to the palace shrines. You dip a fresh palm frond into the water from the brazier, then gently spread drops across carved figures of ancestors, each a bronze bust set into clay nooks. Their surfaces glow in the firelight, framing regal faces of past obas. You whisper the names of each ancestor in turn before leaving offerings of ground cola nut at their feet. The shrine's quiet hush feels at odds with the palace's bustle, but here, too, you perform your duty with steady hands and bowed head. As the sun climbs overhead, you steal a moment to rest beside the grubby courtyard well. The midday meal, far from sight, you eat a single cola nut and sip water from your wrist, small comforts in a life devoted to palace order. You wonder, briefly, what lies beyond these walls, if the dew on distant fields tastes of freedom, or if labor there is, as measured and meticulous as your own. Then the herald's trumpet calls. The oba will receive visitors again, and your path curls back into corridors of carved wood and polished floors. You rise, dust your wrapper, comb a stray lock from your brow, and step forward once more into the palace's seamless rhythm, another quiet servant in a realm of grandeur and strict protocol. Every motion shapes history, though few will ever recall your name. And yet, in these small acts, carrying water, arranging bowls, folding cloth, you help sustain a world older than memory itself. What keeps you turning the well's handle and smoothing royal robes, day after measured day, when your own story remains forever behind the palace veil? You rise before dawn once more, though your body protests each movement. Today is the most solemn of palace observances, the oba's weekly homage to the leopardine animal spirit central to Benin's royal identity. For you, that means not only preparing the ceremonial feast, but also ensuring every corner of the palace is scrubbed spotless. To miss a single speck of dust on the leopard shrine invites whispered rumors of negligence, and in this palace, rumors can curdle into peril. First, the courtyard sweep. Armed with a bundle of stiff palm fronds bound by raffia, you circle the outer peristyle where the leopard shrine stands, an elevated stone plinth carved with thin feline motifs. You brush away leaves and stray straw, guiding each fallen remnant into a clay basin carried by an apprentice. The basin's rim sports sooty smudges from yesterday's incense, a reminder that yesterday's ashes must never linger to stain the present. As you sweep, you recall how you first learned this chore. At 12, you accompanied your mother herself, a palace servant, through each courtyard, watching her precise bends of the wrists and gentle pressure of broom against flagstone. Now, 20 years later, your hands know every stone's contour, every etched groove where leaves gather. In the early light, the courtyard feels alive. A lone sacred ibis struts near the well, its white plumage dulled by clay. A palace cat curls in the sun, and distant voices of traders on the river clamor like the crash of surf. With the courtyard clean, you cross to the leopard hall's inner chamber. Here the shrine stands beneath a high buttressed ceiling, beams carved into writhing snakes. You enter barefoot, footsteps hushed on cool stone. At the shrine's base lie offerings from yesterday, bowls of pounded yams now hardened, drooping fronds of plantain leaves, and half-burnt incense sticks. Your first task is ritual removal. You help the senior servant lift each clay bowl, whisking crumbs into a palm basket to be fed to the palace goats outside. The plantain fronds you submerge in a small pool at the chamber's corner, water that will later irrigate palace gardens, ensuring nothing goes to waste. The incense sticks you break in half and reuse for tomorrow's offering. Once the old offerings are cleared, you kneel to anoint the shrine with purified water. You pour slowly from a conch shell, tracing the leopard's carved spots one by one, whispering the incantation taught by the palace priest's majestic spots of ancestral light. Guide our orba through day and night. The drops pool in carved recesses before seeping away. You feel the shrine's weight, centuries of ceremony pressed into stone, and remember a childhood story of a former servant who fell ill after skipping this ritual. Whether true or palace legend, the lesson remains. Even the smallest act of care binds you to the oba's well-being outside. The first cooks arrive with baskets of yams, plantains, and ground palm kernels. Today's feast is simple: boiled yams drizzled with red palm oil, roasted plantains, and a small serving of spiced fish, enough to sustain the orba without excess. You fetch the bowls and trays prepared last night, brushing them free of spider webs and ash. Each bowl, whether plain clay or polished wood, is chosen for its shape and heat retention. Bowls with thick rims better for grasping whole yams, Wider, shallower bowls contain plantains. The fish is presented in a narrow dish. Its spices arranged like a small fan. While the cooks heat oil over braziers, you tie fresh palm fronds into bundles for table decor. You place them at cardinal points around the shrine. Their green a vivid counterpoint to the ritual's muted stones. You recall how last year's offering faltered when an ill servant's palm fronds wilted prematurely, forcing an emergency replacement, and how that servant was reassigned to less critical duties for months. With the decor set, you turn to garment care for junior palace attendants who will carry the feast. You gather white wrappers and indigo headcloths, checking each for frayed edges or stains. You patch tiny holes with red thread, invisible once woven, and press folds sharp with damp cloth over heated ironwood planks. A supervisor inspects your handiwork, nodding once at the crispness of each fold, before sending attendants off with slender brass bowls balanced on their heads. At last, the feast is ready. You help bear the trays to the leopard hall, walking backward before the shrine in ancient custom, ensuring attendants never turn their backs on the spirit. The hall is hushed. A solitary lantern casts flickering shadows across carved beams. You kneel at the far side as the Arbor's procession enters. Drummers leading, fanbearers next, and finally the Arbor himself, wrapped in velvet-lined wrappers and heavy coral beads. The attendants lay each tray on low tables around the chamber, hands never lingering on the bowls longer than protocol permits. Once the OBA is served and the first tastes are taken, you slip away to assist with midday chores, delivering water. Two courtiers, coiling extra mats behind pillars, replenishing oil lamps. In your first duty, prepare the hall for the Arbor's breakfast audience. You enter the stone-floored chamber where ivory stools rest on a central mat. Faint smoke trails from last night's brazier. You set about clearing ashes, fanning the embers, until only glowing coals remain. Then you fetch fresh charcoal from the granary store, adding it layer by layer to the brazier. Soon a soft warmth radiates through the hall, and you hang a small bronze kettle from a carved wooden hook over the embers. The kettle's handle creaks as you pour water to boil for the Arbor's morning tea. Bitter leaf infusion meant to awaken both senses and spirit. While the water heats, move to the storeroom beneath the dais to retrieve yams, plantains, and bowls of palm oil. You arrange them on lacquered wooden trays, mindful of protocol. The largest plate goes closest to the dais's center. Smaller bowls flank it symmetrically. Each item must be placed with exacting precision, off by a fingers, with risks drawing a reprimand from the palace steward. A murmur arises as the Arbor's morning procession nears. You hear distant calls, oba, and the soft flutter of the parasol's fabric. You step aside, setting the trays against the dais before retreating to paces. A hush falls. The OBA enters, seating himself upon the ivory stool. Attendants pour tea and distribute platters. You remain at attention, eyes lowered, waiting for the signal that breakfast has concluded. A single nod from the EIAs, then the OBA waves a handkerchief, and you and your fellow servants sweep forward to retrieve empty dishes, wrap leftover offerings for the royal hound, and extinguish the brazier's embers. Next, the Arbor's garments must be prepared for the day's public audience. You follow behind the royal dresser, carrying folded wrappers of indigo and crimson. The dresser selects each piece in turn, draping it over the Arbor's shoulders with deft fingers. You hold the ends taut, smoothing fabric to remove creases. Your palms feel the rich weight of dyed cloth, some woven with fine brass threads to catch the light, others simply worn and faded from decades of use. Again, every fold carries meaning. The first fold must align with the oboe's left shoulder to invoke ancestral blessings. The second fold crosses at the chest, symbolizing unity between ruler and people. As the OBA inspects his reflection in a polished bronze mirror held by the dresser, you lean back, gathering stray fibers and adjusting the palace steward's scroll case. You will recall that in childhood, palace pages once taught you the names of each brass plaque on the walls. Now you know every design by heart, but will never possess the right to claim them as your own. Your final task before the midday meal: tend to the palace shrines. You dip a fresh palm frond into the water from the brazier, then gently spread drops across carved figures of ancestors, each a bronze bust set into clay nooks. Their surfaces glow in the firelight, framing regal faces of past Arbors. You whisper the names of each ancestor in turn before leaving offerings of ground kola nut at their feet. The shrine's quiet hush feels at odds with the palace's bustle. But here, too, you perform your duty with steady hands and bowed head. As the sun climbs overhead, you steal a moment to rest beside the grubby courtyard. The midday meal, far from sight. You eat a single kola nut and sip water from your wrist, small comforts in a life devoted to palace order. You wonder, briefly, what lies beyond these walls, if the dew on distant fields tastes of freedom, or if labor there is, as measured and meticulous as your own. Then the herald's trumpet calls. The Arbor will receive visitors again, and your path curls back into corridors of carved wood and polished floors. You rise, dust your wrapper, comb a stray lock from your brow, and step forward once more into the palace's seamless rhythm, another quiet servant in a realm of grandeur and strict protocol. Every motion shapes history, though few will ever recall your name. And yet, in these small acts, carrying water, arranging bowls, folding cloth, you help sustain a world older than memory itself. What keeps you turning the well's handle and smoothing royal robes, day after measured day, when your own story remains forever behind the palace veil? You rise before dawn once more, though your body protests each movement. Today is the most solemn of palace observances, the Oba's weekly homage to the leopardine animal spirit central to Benin's royal identity. For you, that means not only preparing the ceremonial feast but also ensuring every corner of the palace is scrubbed spotless. To miss a single speck of dust on the leopard shrine invites whispered rumors of negligence, and in this palace, rumors can curdle into peril. First, the courtyard sweep. Armed with a bundle of stiff palm fronds bound by raffia, you circle the outer peristyle where the leopard shrine stands. An elevated stone plinth carved with thin feline motifs. You brush away leaves and stray straw, guiding each fallen remnant into a clay basin carried by an apprentice. The basin's rim sports sooty smudges from yesterday's incense, a reminder that yesterday's ashes must never linger to stain the present. As you sweep, you recall how you first learned this chore. At 12, you accompanied your mother herself, a palace servant, through each courtyard, watching her precise bends of the wrist and gentle pressure of broom against flagstone. Now, 20 years later, your hands know every stone's contour, every etched groove where leaves gather. In the early light, the courtyard feels alive. A lone sacred ibis struts near the well, its white plumage dulled by clay. A palace cat curls in the sun, and distant voices of traders on the river clamor like the crash of surf. With the courtyard clean, you cross to the leopard hall's inner chamber. Here, the shrine stands beneath a high buttressed ceiling, beams carved into writhing snakes. You enter barefoot, footsteps hushed on cool stone. At the shrine's base lie offerings from yesterday, bowls of pounded yams now hardened, drooping fronds of plantain leaves and half-burnt incense sticks. Your first task is ritual removal. You help the senior servant lift each clay bowl, whisking crumbs into a palm basket to be fed to the palace goats outside. The plantain fronds you submerge in a small pool at the chamber's corner, water that will later irrigate palace gardens, ensuring nothing goes to waste. The incense sticks you break in half and reuse for tomorrow's offering. Once the old offerings are cleared, you kneel to anoint the shrine with purified water. You pour slowly from a conch shell, tracing the leopard's carved spots one by one, whispering the incantation taught by the palace priest. Majestic spots of ancestral light guide our Oba through day and night. The drops pool in carved recesses before seeping away. You feel the shrine's weight, centuries of ceremony pressed into stone, and remember a childhood story of a former servant who fell ill after skipping this ritual. Whether true or palace legend, the lesson remains. Even the smallest act of care binds you to the Oba's well-being outside. The first cooks arrive with baskets of yams, plantains, and ground palm kernels. Today's feast is simple: boiled yams drizzled with red palm oil, roasted plantains, and a small serving of spiced fish, enough to sustain the OBA without excess. You fetch the bowls and trays prepared last night, brushing them free of spider webs and ash. Each bowl, whether plain clay or polished wood, is chosen for its shape and heat retention. Bowls with thick rims better for grasping hold yams. Wider, shallower bowls contain plantains. The fish is presented in a narrow dish, its spices arranged like a small fan. While the cooks heat oil over braziers, you tie fresh palm fronds into bundles for table decor. You place them at cardinal points around the shrine, their green a vivid counterpoint to the ritual's muted stones. You recall how last year's offering faltered when an ill servant's palm fronds wilted prematurely, forcing an emergency replacement. On how that servant was reassigned to less critical duties for months. With the decor set, you turn to garment care for junior palace attendants who will carry the feast. You gather white wrappers and indigo headcloths, checking each for frayed edges or stains. You patch tiny holes with red thread, invisible once woven, and press folds sharp with damp cloth over heated ironwood planks. A supervisor inspects your handiwork, nodding once at the crispness of each fold before sending attendants off with slender brass bowls balanced on their heads. At last, the feast is ready. You help bear the trays to the leopard hall, walking backward before the shrine in ancient custom, ensuring attendants never turn their backs on the spirit. The hall is hushed. A solitary lantern casts flickering shadows across carved beams. You kneel at the far side as the Oba's procession enters, drummers leading, fan bearers next, and finally the Oba himself, wrapped in velvet-lined wrappers and heavy coral beads. The attendants lay each tray on low tables around the chamber, hands never lingering on the bowls longer than protocol permits. Once the OBA is served and the first tastes are taken, you slip away to assist with midday chores, delivering water. Two courtiers coiling extra mats behind pillars, replenishing oil lamps in side corridors. In each discreet act you uphold the palace's seamless illusion. No dropped bowl, no flickering lamp, no one aware of the servant's hidden toil. As the afternoon sun wanes and the weekly homage concludes, you attend the final rite, snuffing candles in the leopard hall while courtiers file out in solemn single file. You emerge into the courtyard's cool shadows just as the palace gates swing open to welcome evening traders and fishermen returning by canoe. You pause, watching canoes drift toward the riverbank, baskets heaped with fish and ivory. The world outside feels distant yet connected. Trade goods will fill palace storerooms, and tomorrow's feast will draw on these labors. You return to your quarters, where a neighbor's servant greets you with a small bowl of maize gruel and a hunk of cassava bread. You sit cross-legged beneath the clay lamp's glow, eating in silence. Your heart is heavy with fatigue, but lighter for having witnessed the week's most sacred observance. Before sleep steals you, you tug your wrapper tight and comb your hair free of ash. You think of tomorrow's duties, perhaps assisting with palace repairs or preparing the Obos evening scrolls, and of the unending cycles of service. You wonder, as you always do, how many years you'll hawk water and sweep shrines before your own story becomes merely another whisper behind palace gates. What does a life of silent devotion mean, when every act is measured by another's command, as your own dreams go unnoticed? The dawn gong sounds while you still lie on your straw mat, the smell of last night's gruel lingering in the air. Today is not the Obos ceremony, but a day of palace maintenance, tile repairs, lacquer touch-ups, and the annual oiling of carved doors. For you, this means joining the palace work gang, 20 servants tasked with preserving the palace's gleaming sheen. It is a quieter duty than the ritual observances, but no less vital. A palace in disrepair reflects poorly on the Orba, and sloppy work and invites severe reprimand. First light finds us at the southern gate, where old palm oil mortar has cracked and chipped. The head mason hands you a wooden trowel and a small leather pouch of fresh lime mortar. Kneeling on the cool stone, you spread mortar into every crevice between tiles, smoothing it level before stepping back to inspect your work. 3 tiles. Down you blot stray mortar with a damp cloth, mindful not to stain the flagstones. Your neighbor, an older woman who once scrubbed the leopard hall's floors, hums an old palace chant as she works its single-line melody echoing across the courtyard's hushed dot at mid-morning. We gather near the northern wall for lacquer repairs. The wall's murals, brass plaques depicting past orbas and procession scenes are rimmed with wood frames, coated in thick red lacquer. Decades of sun and smoke have dulled the red's brilliance. The lacquer master divides us into 2 teams. One sands away flaking lacquer with rough palm fiber pads. The other applies fresh coats. You are on team sanding. Working in pairs, you press the pad against the wood, back and forth until the surface feels smooth and ready for the next coat. Dust rises like fine mist, settling on our clothes and faces. You wipe it away with the sleeve of your wrapper, then bend once more to resume sanding. By midday, our arms ache and dust fills your throat. You pause to sip water from a clay flask, the cool liquid soothing your parched mouth. Across the courtyard, you glimpse the Orba's mother strolling in the garden, her coral beads swaying. Her lavender wrapper pristine, she pauses before an incense burner, inhaling deeply. You wonder if she knows her servant's toil just a stone's throw away, sanding and oiling so her own walls may gleam. The lacquer master calls for lunch. A long wooden bench beneath a shade tree serves as our dining table. Today's meal, cold, cassava cakes dipped in pepper sauce, and a few ripe guavas handed out from the garden. You shared your cassava with the older scrubber beside you, who tells a story of palace work crews in her youth when repairs took months, not weeks, and an apprentice who fell from scaffolding lost an arm. You feel gratitude for modern methods, but also weight of inherited caution. Every duty demands respect for danger, no matter how routine. After the brief meal, we move on to the grand doors of the OBA's private chamber. These doors, massive slabs carved in deep bas-relief, depict the Orba's lineage, from founding ancestor to current ruler. Today they receive their annual oiling, a mixture of palm oil and beeswax warmed over braziers and spread with feathers. Once you help stir the mixture in iron pots, which hiss like soft rain when touched to flame. Once melted, you dip the wand and sweep it along carved lines. The oil seeps into wood, darkening grain patterns and restoring natural luster. Carvings of antelope, leopards, and coral beads shimmer under fresh oil, reminders that service need not be drudgery but an act of preservation, of honoring past and future alike. As you work, you recall your childhood lessons, how your mother taught you the difference between neem oil and palm oil, how a single drop of neem could blot a carving black. Today, as you apply palm wax oil and store the neem flask safely out of reach, you feel a small triumph in mastering these secrets. The OBA will walk these halls tonight, and the doors will gleam, but only you and your companions will know the careful strokes that made it so. By late afternoon, the palace's outer grounds are nearly complete. A final group oils the slender pillars of the audience hall. You stand back, wiping sweat from your brow, surveying the gleam of polished wood, the restored color of red lacquer, and the freshly oiled doors awaiting tomorrow's royal footfall. The palace feels renewed, as though it has shed last year's dust and tension. Then the supervisor calls our names and hands each servant a small pouch. dried fish, a chunk of salted yam, and a folded cloth wrapper to take home. We bow in unison, then slip through the palace gates into the cooling evening air. Outside, the river breeze carries fishy tang and distant laughter of children chasing firefly lights. Walking back to quarters, you pass by the leopard hall's entrance. Moonlight filters through carved lattice, and you glimpse faint shadows dancing across the walls. Inside, drivers of ancestors sit beneath brass plaques, their eyes reflective in flickering lantern light. You pause for a breath, wishing you could step inside and honor the spirits once more. But your duties are done until tomorrow's dawn calls you back. In your quarters, you unwrap the salted yam and fish, savoring the simple meal under a single oil lamp. The work's dust still clings to your skin, and the aches in your arms speak of purpose rather than pain. You think of the arbor's private court tomorrow, of new robes to fold and fresh incense to light. You think, too, of the palace's endless rhythms, a cycle of care, ceremony, and maintenance that sustains a kingdom's heart. Before sleep claims you, you lie upon your mat and run through the day's tasks in your mind, marking each in its turn. Swept courtyards, cleansed shrines, oiled doors, lacquer renewed. These acts go unseen, yet they uphold a world of gilded halls and ancestral power. You wonder then whether history is written only in grand events or if it is carried forward in every silent stroke of a servant's hand. As your eyelids close, you hold that thought, that service in its humblest form fashions the very legacy future generations will admire or forget. And in that quiet uncertainty, you drift to sleep. Alt routes in the King's Revenue section to AS. The caravan gates clang shut and dust settles over the yard. You gather your assistant beneath the kiosk's low canopied awning. The mid-morning sun has climbed higher, turning sandstone walls from ochre to pale gold. You spread the day's ledgers across a rough-hewn bench. Tally books, tariff scrolls, and seals all bear the king's emblem. Your assistant uncovers the ledger where you noted the flooded northern route and flips to the margins filled with anxious scribbles. Master, he murmurs, tracing a line between cowrie shell columns, with the north closed, southern passage. Must handle near double volume. But camels slip on shale in the past delays already reported. You nod, recalling the narrow Wadi Karim defile, a rocky gorge where wind scours loose shale from the walls, sending slides onto the route below. A single overturned wagon can block traffic for days. Without the riverway, salt once as abundant. As sand risks scarcity, you rise and stride toward the caravan yard's central hearth, where merchants from the Zulavi clan supervise fresh crews unpacking cedar crates. The cedar smells sweet and damp against the heat. You approach their merchant capo, a lean woman clad in granite-gray robes dyed with pounded lichen. Zulavi, you begin evenly your terms for forwarding fish crates through Wadi Karimani, extra fees. She arches an eyebrow. 2 more cowries per crate. Clerk, risk premium for roadmen clearing slides. You glance at your assistant, who quickly recalculates. A tiny surcharge surged the king's revenues, but at the cost of merchant goodwill. You make a note. 2,125 plus 152 risk cowries from Zul. Your ink pen scratches the margin. Next, a guild of salt pan owners arrives, their robes flecked with pale residue. They deliver fresh blocks hewn yesterday at Oasis Pans, near the southern dunes. The driver bows, his fingers stiff from handling coarse salt. He presents a scroll, an advance charter for 2 extra wagons, permits granted by the palace's treasurer. But the scroll's seal is cracked. You frown, eyeing the shallow tear through the royal emblem's crown. Unsealed. You say, running a finger over the split wax. Get the treasurer to confirm or I cannot record these loads officially. He lowers his head. Of course, clerk, I'll return this afternoon. His camel shifts restlessly, the great humps swaying like gentle waves, leaving him to arrange verified permits. You walk to the weigh station, a pair of bronze scales perched on thick stone plinths. A caravan of ivory traders has arrived from the river villages, bearing crusted tusks that they exchange for salt brick rations. Each tusk is a heavy wrapped bundle. You inspect the largest, weighing it. The scales dip heavily, and you tip the king's share of salt bricks onto the other pan. You note the balance. 12 tusks bring 96 bricks, of which 12 bricks are ceded to the crown while you tally. A rider approaches on a swift pony, an emissary from the coastal citadel seeking immediate salt for curing salted fish bound for overseas merchants. He requests priority, offering rare sandalwood logs in exchange. Sandalwood commands high value, but if you divert salt meant for inland markets, towns along the desert trade routes will grumble. You lift your gaze to the stone arch framing the caravan road. The rider waits. The Zulavi merchants cluster beyond. The scales your assistant watches expectantly. The kingdom's economy depends on these fine judgments, which loads to expedite, which to delay, and which to seal in parchment scrolls. In the shade of the kiosk you unfurl the tariff scrolls. For export commodities, fish and ivory, sandalwood appears under negotiable exports, subject to special dispensation. You weigh the options. Supply coastal needs to earn sandalwood for palace furnishings, or maintain salt flow inward to support the newly reopened South Caravan route. The scales sit empty before you. Your assistant coughs softly. The remains flooded. The king's granaries hold barley for inland towns, but without salt, they cannot preserve their meat stocks. Delay further north shipments, and desert villages face spoilage. Divert inland salt to coastal exports, and river towns starve for seasoning. The caravan yard echoes with merchants arranging loads. Sunlight gleams on pale salt bricks. You close the tariff scroll, roll it carefully, and weigh a final decision. You will allocate half the king's salt rations to coastal traders in exchange for sandalwood, and reserve the other half for inland towns, an unprecedented split. You record the decree in your ledger, dipping your quill into ink. As the caravan drumbeats sound calling the Zuluvi wagons forward, you stand at the kiosk's entrance, ledger in hand. The decision carries risk. Coastal merchants may be pleased, but the desert villages may revolt. The floodwaters show no sign of receding. Will this balanced decree sustain the realm's salt needs until the river route reopens? Or will even this compromise prove too modest, leaving either the coast or the desert to thirst for seasoning? Beneath the blistering midday sun, the caravan yard hums with renewed urgency. Northern wagons remain idle behind paddocks of stacked crates and prodded camels, their drivers restless. Meanwhile, Zuluvi merchants beckon coastal traders forward as you stand by the kiosk, ledger in hand. The leather binding creaks, heavy with inked decrees and cowrie counts. Today, your decision split the king's salt shares between inland and coastal routes will be tested by the crackling rhythm of wheels on cobblestones and the impatient cries of merchants. Don't you raise your voice to be heard over the clamor. Zuluvi clan, you call your first 5 wagons to the shore. Legends of sandalwood casks await in exchange. The remaining rations will proceed westward by camels through Wadi Karim. Your tone is calm but firm, carrying authority honed by months of counting shells and measuring bricks. A murmur ripples through the courtyard. The head merchant, his robe still flecked with salt, nods solemnly. He dispatches scouts to signal coastal traders, who usher their wagons toward the southern gate. Behind them, drivers load the final salted fish crates onto waiting boats. The scent of cedar mingles with brine in the scented breeze. Meanwhile, 6 wagons destined inland form a line beside the shattered remains of the northern route. Your assistant places fresh seals upon each crate. Half Moon Royal Share Crescent Sunnyland allotment. Camels are harnessed with thick leather straps and padded blankets for the long trek through Wadi Karim's rocky defile. Each beast stoops to drink from barrels of brackish water and tarnished by river floods before shouldering its burden of salt bricks. You walk beside the first wagon, feeling the coarse grains shift under its canvas cover. The lead driver, a burly figure named Kabir, glances at your decrees with a weathered grin. Your half load will feed 7 villages along the salt road, he says, hefting a torch pole to guide his camel. We press north at dawn. You nod, recalling the precarious journey ahead. Narrow mountain ledges, boulder-strewn passes, and the risk of sudden shale slides. Kabir's grin falters at the thought, but returns as he tips his head in salute. The caravan sets forth, its lanterns bobbing at dusk like distant stars fallen to earth at sunset. You return to the palace's treasury hall, its vaulted ceilings echoing with hushed whispers. The treasurer sits at a long wooden table piled with sealed sacks of salt cowrie bowls and sandalwood logs wrapped in coarse linen. The firelight casts tremulous shadows across his lined face as you enter with your ledger. He motions you forward, and you present the tallies. 989 bricks seeded inland, 989 dispatched to the shore, 152 risk carries, 96 ivory to salt conversions, sandalwood logs weighing 224 pounds. Each figure you recite brings a new crease to the treasurer's brow. He slides parchment across the table. Royal warrant to remit a quarter share of sandalwood for palace carvings. You sign with a flourish, your mind racing through the events, flooded river routes, floods of caravan complaints, and the harsh calculations of grain and salt that dictate life and death. In desert towns, the treasurer offers a rare smile. Your compromise stands, he says softly. May the king's coffers remain full, and the people salted. As you leave the hall, secured guard torches light the corridor's flame-scorched tapestries. Night drapes the city in indigo. In the distance, caravan wheels clatter along the causeway, and the Zuluvi ship's lanterns drift on the coastal waters. You pause under an archway, listening to the faint echoes. The salt you measured, the cowries you counted, the sand you traded. Each decision bore consequences for distant villages and far-reaching shores alike. In the days that follow, your ledger records no major shortages. Inland towns barter surplus grain for salt brick rations. Coastal traders fill their holds with sandalwood, returning to taste the preserved fish. Wadi Karim's trek, though perilous, yields no disasters. Kabir's scouts report only minor slides, cleared by the caravan's labor. The flooded river route recedes at last, opening the river channel once more for boats laden with fresh salt shipments. Yet, as spring thaws the desert's crust, you revisit your ledger margins. A cautionary note, to monitor caravan delays and to adjust risk fees for the next season. The balance you struck today will not hold forever. Seasonal floods, desert raids, or royal edicts could tip the scales anew. standing by the city gate. You watch the twin routes converge, camel trains on the southern pass, river barges gliding against the current to the palace docks. You feel the rhythm of Salt's journey in your bones. The night watch calls. The clink of cowries, the creak of oarlocks reminders that statecraft often rests on the humblest grains. Tonight, as you pen a final entry and lay aside your quill, you reflect on how simple salt bricks, once tools for preservation, became instruments of power-binding desert tribes, fueling royal treasuries, and shaping human endurance across rock and wave. In the hush of the treasury hall, you recall the caravan drumming through the dunes and the mishaps narrowly avoided. The kingdom sleeps, nourished by Salt's silent grace. Yet tomorrow, you whisper to the empty scrolls, you must measure again, not just Salt, but the fragile trust that holds commerce and crown together. And as you extinguish the candle, your final thought lingers. In lands carved by wind and water, where salt is more precious than gold, can any agreement truly last beyond the shifting sands? You awaken in the pre-dawn chill just inside the city gates of Benin, where the red earth blends into the blackened footprints of merchants who have already gathered at the river's edge. From your vantage atop the carved wooden palisade, the very platform where you inspect incoming tribute, watch lanterns bob like silent fireflies along the muddy bank. Today, 6 dugout canoes are to embark, a priver laden with bronze figurines, ivory tusks, and richly lacquered coral beads, bound for Portuguese trading posts on the distant coast. As Benin's chief customs recorder, you carry the tallied scrolls of the Oba's treasury in a leather satchel at your side. Each evening, after the river traders return, you record the weights and counts. Slabs of bronze, measured in standard royal palms. Lengths of ivory, cut into hand units. Strings of red coral, knotted into parcels of 50 beads. But today, your role is reversed. You count outward, ensuring each canoe carries precisely the Oba's allotment of goods promised under the recent alliance with the Portuguese governor in Benin Bight. The first canoe rests on the bank, its curved hull hewn from a single Iroko trunk, black oozing pitch seals its seams. A cluster of royal brass plaques, still warm from last night's casting fires, awaits bunged into dry palm sorghum stalks for padding. You kneel beside the plaques and gently press your fingers against their embossed surfaces. The Oba's regalia, a procession of stylized leopards and crowned heads. Each plaque bears the Oba's face, rendered in meticulous relief. Eyes gazing toward the horizon where sea and sky blend. Your assistant, a wiry young scribe named Eek, whispers the tally: 46 plaques, 2 for each canoe, plus for reserve shields. You inspect the bundles of ivory next. 14 tusks, each wrapped in bamboo mats and cushioned with goat hair stuffing. The tusks gleam with pale promise under the lantern's flicker. Trade weight demands 2 tusks per canoe. Eek recites the total out loud, ensuring no mistakes will later cost the OBA his due. Beyond, you see the coral beads, a riot of deep crimson strung in loops and coiled into wicker baskets. These beads came from the OBA's personal stores, gifted to the Portuguese as signs of goodwill. You count them again, exactly 900 beads, 9 baskets of 100 each, plus an extra 50 to account for customs roughage. A breeze stirs the river, rustling the palms and carrying the scent of brackish water and fresh ebony from beneath a thatched shelter. The clan captains step forward, tall figures in patched linen robes dyed with indigo and smoked palm. One by one, they present carved ebony tally sticks to you, 2 for the brass, 1 for the ivory, and 1 for the coral. You stamp each tally stick with hot wax sealed by the Oba's lionhead signet. The wax crackles softly, sealing the tribute, as irrevocably as the river seals the canoes to their course. The customs kiosk, a raised coffer dripping with intricate bronze nodule, stands just behind you. Here, you record the outward tribute. Canoe A, 8 plaques, 2 tusks, 150 coral beads. Canoe B, each entry you ink in soot-black pigment, the letters curling like river reeds across the parchment. This record will accompany the canoes, a floating ledger, guiding the Portuguese officials to verify and reciprocate at your side. Eek staggers under a sack of salt, a commodity the Portuguese value as highly as bronze in return. The salt pans of the coastal lagoons supply this essential preservative. Eek unloads 2 sacks per canoe, each weighing precisely 50 pounds. You inspect the weave of the sack, checking for tears where salt might spill and erode the canoe's planks. Each sack is sewn shut with red cotton thread, an echo of the coral bead's hue and a reminder of the Oba's sovereignty over trade. Now the canoes gather at the water's edge. Their paddlers, strong-shouldered youths draped in woven raffia, skirts away to the ceremonial drumbeat. Each carries a small carved whistle strapped to his wrist, an instrument to signal emergencies on the river's shoals. A chieftain's drum sounds, 3 low reverberations that vibrate through the damp, morning air. The paddlers plunge their oars in unison, stirring the murky water into churned ripples that reflect the lantern lights like liquid copper. You step onto the bank's slope and watch the flotilla peel away from shore. The lead canoe bears the Oba's brass-studded banner, a crimson leather pennon embossed with a brass leopard, catching what little dawn light filters through palm fronds. 2 canoes behind fly smaller pennons of ivory and coral. the remaining craft trail, acknowledging the oboe's nested hierarchy of symbols. As the canoes drift toward the river's song, the gentle slap of paddles against wood, the murmur of clan captains barking navigation, orders you retreat to the customs kiosk. The oboe's council expects a full report by midday. Your ledger awaits conclusions, accounts balanced, tallies sealed, tribute dispatched. Yet beyond the customary ceilings, you know the true test lies in half a moon's time, when the canoes return with Portuguese goods, fine linen, iron nails, a new clockwork watch, perhaps if the Portuguese governor's interest holds. Until then, you ponder the ancient currents that guided Benin's trade for centuries, from kola nuts and pepper to brass and coral. Now, under a new agreement, your city extends its reach across the river and over the horizon to meet European ambition. Each item you tallied will shape that encounter. You close the ledger and turn your gaze upstream toward the mangroves. Will Edo City's tribute voyages yield the wealth and prestige the Oba seeks? Or will these newly opened channels bring unforeseen obligations, debts, or cultural currents that reshape Benin's world irrevocably? As the day warms and sunlight filters through the mangrove canopy, you settle at your riverside of raised platform smoothed by years of sandalwood pallets. The open sides frame the winding waterway, where small wooden posts mark the edge of the current. Before you, the flotilla's curved canoes ease onward, each carrying the oboe's tribute to the Portuguese trading fort many leagues downstream. Now your concern shifts from tallying exports to anticipating the Europeans' returns. Cloth for court robes, iron bars for palace repairs, glass beads for new ceremonial collars. First, turn to the cartographic scroll unrolled on your lap bench, a detailed river chart, annotated by the late master navigator Osei, whose faded glyphs record sandbars, flooded creeks, and hidden shoals. Osei's careful hand mapped every bend from Benin City to the coastal mouths. You trace the river's hairpin northward, recalling reports of rising floodwaters upstream. Heavy rains could swell tributaries and reroute currents, scattering canoes. In hidden eddies, you dip your quill in ochre ink and annotate warning notations near the village of Ogba. Monitor flood level. Consider sending relief paddle crews. Your assistant Eek offers you a cluster of letters, sewn in goatskin pouches, messages from coastal governors and local chiefs. You untie the first, a slender note from Jaga clan elders complaining of Portuguese smugglers bribing river guards. The leather pouch bears faint specks of salt water. Inside, the message reads, "Honored clerk, we beseech your intervention." 3 canoes loaded with brass masks were diverted without tribute. The river guards demand prompt review. You press your lips together and mark the line. Jaga report. Investigate missing masks. Diverted tribute could spark conflict with a powerful clan. An immediate inquiry is needed or risk the Orba's displeasure. Next, you pore over a patched parchment from the coastal fort's factor. Don Manuel, written in Portuguese and translated by a visiting interpreter. It promises dispatch of fine damask cloth and several iron nails, early blacksmith's tools prized by palace carpenters in exchange for an increased coral bead allotment next voyage. You underline the phrase Damasco Fino Poderoso and note the factor's courtesy. Your people's skill in bronze we admire, yet the factor's polite request for extra beads hints at negotiation. Beads remain scarce, and conceding too many now may leave your next tribute short. Lift the sealed pouch containing the factor's missive and consult Eek quietly. Our coral reserves stand at 900 beads. If we promise 50 more for Damask, inland salt shipments will suffer. Eek's brow furrows as he recalculates the balance of future exports. Meanwhile, the river itself churns with incoming craft. You spot the first canoe gliding upstream, its hull bulging with Portuguese goods. The paddlers slow as they near the embankment and tie off to carved wooden cleats. A knot of European traders and Orba Palace escorts awaits. You step down smooth wooden stairs and approach the landing. Standing on the sand, you greet the factor, Don Manuel, a portly man in a worn wool jerkin and faded red sash. His round face glows under a battered leather cap. Next to him stands Orba's liaison, Chief Uer, tall and stoic in dyed textile robes. They exchange nods. Clerk of Customs Don Manuel says in heavily accented Edo, "We bring promised cloth and tools." He gestures to 4 stacked bales of damask, each wrapped in muslin, and 3 chests of forged nails, their iron heads glinting. And news from beyond the Cape. You bow respectfully and step forward to record. 2 bolts of fine damask, measuring the royal standard of 20 cubits each. 3 chests holding 100 iron nails apiece. You dip your quill and inscribe the details in your ledger's imports column. Opposite the earlier exports tally. As you scribble, Eek slips from your side to inspect the damask cloths weave against a lantern's glow. The fabric shimmers softly, threads of indigo and gold fiber interwoven. This cloth rivals palace-sourced textile. The nails, too, promise stronger joints for the palace's wooden beams. Don Manuel clears his throat. For your part, we await our coral beads. He taps his cloak where a small pouch dangles. You glance at the pouch's shape, just enough for 50 beads. He offers it with a practiced smile. You hesitate. A subtle measure of power. The obus candle lanterns burn low. Tonight's feast will hang new curtains of damask in the royal hall, yet your ledger warns that excessive bead exports weaken future coral allotments. You nod and accept the pouch, opening it to reveal precisely 50 crimson beads. You count them aloud, ensuring his honesty. Next he produces another pouch containing a dozen rougher trade beads, cheap Venetian tchotchke. You record them as courtesy extras but mark their differing quality. Satisfied, Don Manuel offers. You wear a curt nod before leaving his paddlers to unload the goods onto river carts bound for the palace. The paddlers paddle off to catch the incoming tide. You remain by the landing, recording the tide times. High tide in 2 hours, crucial for sending empty canoes back upstream. Without proper timing, incoming vessels risk stranding at low water. You notate launch return canoes at slack tide in bold, a directive to avoid grounding the tribute fleet. Amid the bustle, a sudden spark, someone's lantern appended in the surf sizzles as oil drips on damp sand. You step forward, unmoved by panic, and bark orders. Eek fetches a basket of wet palm leaves. The factor's steward hurries to lift the overturned lantern and shield the embers. Within moments, the sizzle stops. A minor disruption, yet enough to remind you how trifles an oil spill. A broken rope can threaten the fragile rhythms of river trade. With the tide still an hour from cresting, you retreat to your kiosk and review the day's dual ledgers. Outbound bronze and ivory matched by inbound textiles and iron. You tally totals. 6 canoes each carried the promised tribute, 4 bolts of damask and 15 chests of nails arrived, 50 coral beads exchanged. Yet 2 bronze masks remain missing. The Joga report, unsatisfied, calling Eek closer. You outline 2 courses: dispatch a review party to Joga villages or petition the OBA to sanction the Portuguese factor if the masks were taken in bad faith. The decision rests on uncertain facts, rumors of river brigands or of miscounted plaques. Eek hesitates, pen poised. You lean toward the river's swirl, knowing that unresolved disputes here could spark conflict over trade rights. Should you trust the factor's honor and wait for his explanation, or preemptively protect the Oba's assets by investigating the Jaga claim? The river whispers at the dock, the tide rising, canoes gliding steadfastly homeward. You know the Oba will that evening. As orange embers fade in the hearth of the Oba's council hall, you stand before the Oba's carved throne platform, your ledger in hand. The flicker of torchlight dances across flattened bronze plaques lining the war reminders of Benin's centuries of artistry and trade. Chief Uer sits upon the ivory-inlaid throne, crowned with coral beads and attended by palace eunuchs. The head Jaga clan chief kneels before you, bronze mask fragments clutched in his shaking hands, his voice laden with accusation. Across the hall, Don Manuel stands quietly, his Portuguese cloak folded neatly, awaiting judgment. You clear your throat and begin. My liege. The tribute canoes returned, bearing the Oba's brass plaques, ivory tusks, and coral beads as agreed. In exchange, the factor provided fine damask cloth and iron nails. You pause, allowing the Oba's gaze to settle upon you. However, 2 masks remain unaccounted for. The Jaga elders report their removal without sanction. I conducted inquiries at the coastal fort and received assurances from Don Manuel that no masks passed through Portuguese custody. Murmurs ripple through the council. The Oba's brow furrows. You unfold a parchment bearing Don Manuel's translated testimony, sealed with Portuguese wax. It states the masks never reached the fort, suggesting diversion of the. You then present a second document. Clan Guard patrol logs you dispatched earlier, marking the river's mileposts where masked riders, secret traders, the logs dubbed them, were seen ferrying goods inland, south of Ovius Delta. A hush falls. The Oba's jade-tipped scepter rests motionless. Are these claims conclusive? He asks, voice soft but firm. You reply, my liege, the combination of Jaga testimony, coastal factor records, and patrol logs indicates the masks were intercepted by third-party river brigands, likely uninvolved with clan or Portuguese trade. Chief Uer inclines his head. Clerk, have the masks recovered. The Joga chief holds out the fragments, too brittle to restore. You recommend compensation. 2 new plaques cast by the royal foundry, matched in style and weight. The Obi nods, then restore the tribute and revise the patrol routes. Strengthen oversight at the Delta outposts. As the council adjourns, you linger beneath the carved archway, pondering the evening's resolution. The masks lost to opportunistic brigands, yet trade channels remain intact by swift inquiry, accurate record-keeping, and diplomatic restraint. The Oba's authority endures not merely through the spectacle of bronze and coral, but through the mundane diligence of tallying tribute and tracing river routes. Walking back along the lantern-lit causeway, you pass the dock where canoes are, rebundled for their next tribute voyage. You contemplate the quiet lessons of this day, that even in a realm of elaborate rituals and regal pageantry, the fate of kingdoms can hinge on the smallest bronze mask fragment or the timely notations in a clerk's ledger. Before you retire, you jot a closing note in your margin. Enhance river watch posts. Commission redesigned mask seals. Consider formal patrol alliance with Jogger clan. You set down your quill, the ink drying as dawn nears. In the steady rhythm of river outward, trade goods inward Benin's ties to distant coasts grow stronger, yet ever fraught with unpredictable detours. The Obo's prosperity rests on bronze artistry and record-keeping in equal measure. As the city sleeps, you gaze upstream where moonlit water ripples past the mangroves. You recall Osei's faded chart in the unpredictable currents of both river and human ambition. In that restless flow lies Benin's future. Artistry that travels beyond horizons, tribute that fuels alliances, and the clerk's quiet vigilance that holds it all together. And in the hush before dawn, you wonder, when next the canoes depart, what new challenges will the river bring, and will your ledger once again guide the Obo's realm through its silent, shifting tides. You arrive at the palace gates weeks before the coronation ceremony, a season when Benin City hums with the low drone of anticipation. The dry Hamadan winds have coaxed a thin layer of red dust onto every carved pillar and worn brick. From your vantage on the outer bailey, you watch palace artisans erect wooden scaffolds draped in ochre-dyed cloth, each crease carefully smoothed by palace unit. Pole by pole, they assemble an open pavilion, its slated roof waiting to hold wreaths of palm fronds and strings of fresh kola nut blossoms. As the Obo's lead protocol officer, your task is to choreograph every step of the succession rites. You carry a palm leaf notebook filled with precise timings when the royal drums must beat, when the heralds proclaim the new Obo's name, and when the sacred courtyard oil must be poured. Each entry is inked in brownish charcoal, the script looping like stylized parrot's tails. Today, 8 days before the grand ceremony, you conduct the provisional inspection. Chief among your concerns is the preparation of the Ijon Iranwan, the sacred shrine of ancestral bronzes. You step into the shrine's dark interior, where flickering torchlight reveals rows of bronze heads arrayed on wooden shelves, each head sculpted in minute detail preserved. The visage of a past OBA, their full lips coiffed hairnets and carefully incised coral necklaces. The bronze's surfaces glint in the low light, bearing centuries of ceremonies. You kneel before the central head, believed to represent Oba Uer the Great, whose reign first codified these rituals. Adjacent, you find 2 plaques bearing minor tarnish patches of green patina dulling carved leopard spots. You call for palace smiths, who arrive with small bundles of beeswax polish and bundles of fresh palm fiber brushes. Under your watchful eye they buff the plaques until the leopard's forms shine with renewed luster. You record in your notebook, ancestral heads cleaned, plaques 5 and 6 polished. Next you move to the open courtyard, where a circular clay basin awaits its consecration oil. Men in linen tunics carry gourds of unrefined palm kernel oil, their elbows braced against woven straw panniers. They pour the thick, amber liquid into the basin, its surface rippling like molten bronze. You note the oil's level against tally marks scratched into the basin's rim, one for each ceremonial day. 4 days before the ritual, today marks the first offering, symbolizing the new Oba's promise to nourish the realm. Around the basin, 4 corner altars stand on wooden pedestals, each altar dedicated to a cardinal direction. Before each, you arrange small bowls of kola nuts, coral beads, and crushed camwood powder, ingredients for the blessings the Oba will receive. You touch each bowl lightly, ensuring the kola nuts face eastward, coral beads southward, and camwood westward, per ancestral instruction. The northward altar, reserved for the future, remains empty until the final day. While you verify altar placements, palace drummers practice behind a curtain of woven raffia. Their drum beats deep resonant thumps echo through the courtyard, synchronizing with your own heart. You step back to listen. Each pulse marks a heartbeat of Benin, its rhythm steady and unbroken across generations. The master drummer nods to you, hands poised over his largest drum. You raise a gloved hand, a signal that timing is correct, and he begins a low prelude, one that will swell into full regalia on coronation dawn. Your final inspection takes you to the pavilion itself, where rows of wooden stools have been set in concentric rings. The innermost circle bears the Oba's ivory staff and coral crown perched atop a crimson velvet cushion. You test the cushion's height, ensuring it aligns with the royal platform's carved leopard throne steps. You trace the stool arrangement in your notebook, 12 for palace elders, 16 for senior chiefs, and for blank stools reserved for foreign dignitaries, Portuguese, Hausa caravan leaders, and neighboring Ife emissaries. As dusk falls, you oversee the placement of oil lanterns, small earthen lamps set along the pavilion's perimeter. Each holds a single drop of palm oil sealed with a wick made from woven cotton. When lit, these lamps will cast a soft golden glow, neither too bright to obscure the ancestral bronzes nor too dim to hide perchings of crimson-clad dancers slated to perform the leopard's proclamation before the Oba's anointment. Finally, under a waning moon, you step to the pavilion's edge and call for closure. Gates secure, you declare, altars consecrated, ancestral shrine cleansed, pavilion ready. Your scribe Eek nods and seals your notebook with beeswax. You pause. At the pavilion's entrance, palm leaf notebook tucked at your side, breath soft in the cool night air. In 4 days, this space will host the reveal of a new sovereign. Today, it stands empty, ordered by your hand, but silent of its ultimate purpose. What hidden traditions remain unspoken, waiting to unfold when the new OBA ascends before dawns? First light, you return to the pavilion, its pillars still bearing the faint glow of last night's lanterns. A deeper hush blankets the courtyard, now only the echo of distant drum practice drifts from the Orba's dance grounds. Ahead, palace stewards have already arranged fresh bundles of kola nut blossoms, their pale pink petals caught in the low breeze. You step lightly over worn flagstones, careful not to disturb the symmetrical rows that will soon fill with onlookers. Your first task is to oversee the arrival of the ivory staff in coral crown. At the heart of the pavilion, to palace you carry a lacquered chest. They lift its lid with reverent precision, revealing the royal regalia, a slender ivory rod carved with leopards and crowned with a cluster of gold filigree, and beside it, a coral diadem set with polished beads in graduated sizes. You examine each piece under the dim torchlight, noting a tiny fissure in one coral bead likely caused by last night's packing. Without hesitation, you summon the palace lapidary. Within minutes, a skilled artisan arrives. His leather apron, flecked with coral dust, he drills a microscopic hole in the bead's core, careful to preserve its shape, then reinforces it with a translucent beeswax resin mixed with ground You observe the wedge of red camwood powder dissolving in hot oil, the mixture's hue deepening from rust to garnet. The artisan's delicate work takes nearly half an hour. Each measured breath reminds you of the regalia's symbolic weight. When he steps back, you test the bead by gently tugging on a gold link. It holds firm. Next, you turn your attention to the ceremonial platform steps. Months ago, Chief Woodcarver Osagi carved each riser with stylized leopards in mid-prow. Now, you find traces of splintered wood along the 4th step where palace dancers will descend in glittering brass anklets. You fetch a slender bundle of palm fiber brushes and, with steady hand, sweep away stray shavings. Then, you apply a thin coat of linseed oil to the carved leopards, their furred flanks gaining a soft sheen that will catch torchlight on coronation night. By the time the sun begins to glow through the mangrove canopy, the pavilion stands transformed, regalia polished, platform spotless, altars adorned. Nevertheless, your notebook reveals one final concern: the procession route from the throne hall to the pavilion edges to narrow alleys just wide enough for the Oba's palanquin. By tradition, the royal bearers must lower the palanquin to pass under the low-hanging rafters of the northeastern portico. Yesterday, you approved roof timbers for minimal clearance. Today you instruct palace carpenters to shave an extra half-inch of wood from the portico beams to prevent any snagging of royal robes or dangling coral ornaments. You survey the workmen as they employ ADSs and fine grit sanding stones. Their rhythmic chopping echoes the faint drum beats still practicing afar. Rising shavings drift like ochre snow across the courtyard. You sketch a quick notation: portico clearance, verified palanquin passage, safe with structural matters settled. You shift focus to the ceremonial participants. Beside the pavilion, palace heralds gather, their painted drums and herald staves at the ready. You convene them in a tight circle, reciting the precise sequence of proclamations. First, hearken now, all subjects of Benin, by the power of sacred ancestors. Then the Oba's birth name, followed by his throne name, each repeated thrice. You remind them that any deviation in cadence could offend the ancestral guardians. Ghostly echoes of past proclamations seem to whisper through the rafters, heightening your own heartbeat as you watch the heralds nod in silent agreement. Your final inspection leads you to the Oba's changing chamber, a curtained enclave behind the pavilion where the new sovereign will don the coral crown and ivory staff. Inside, stewards lay out layers of coral-embroidered cloth and amulets blessed by palace priests. You count each garment: 6 coral-collared gowns, 8 pairs of beaded anklets, and 1 gold-woven sash said to have once belonged to Oba Ogwala. Carefully, you fold and refold the newest gown, its coral pendants clinking softly. You note in your ledger, regalia garb, complete, blessings of Ioba due at hour of crowning. Stepping back, you trace, once more, the route the Oba will traverse, from the inner hall through the drummer's stand, past the oil-lit altars, and ascending the pavilion steps to the ancestral shrine. Each footstep will be watched by court officials, walking in a precise pattern of 4 steps forward, 1 to the side, symbolic of Benin's guiding compass. A single misstep here could be read as cosmic imbalance. You rub your chin in contemplation. Tomorrow's dawn will test not only the Oba's resolve, but your own meticulous planning as midday heat settles over the city. You gather your protocol notes and depart the pavilion. In passing, you glimpse the unfinished northward altar still, awaiting its final offering. For that, you summon the Oba's favored herbalist, whose wild camwood blossoms must be crushed at the very moment of coronation. The timing is critical. The crushed petals will fall like red rain upon the Oba's hands, sealing his bond with the forest spirits. Finally, as you return to your chambers, you reflect on the layers of ceremony you have prepared. Shrine cleanings, regalia repairs, architectural clearances, herald rehearsals, and sacred offerings. These details, while mundane in writing, shape the very essence of legitimacy and cosmic order in Benin's royal succession. You close your palm leaf notebook with a satisfied click, but wonder what secret rites, whispered only among palace priests, remain uninspected, rituals that may only reveal themselves when the Obier steps into the coral crown at dawn's fragile hour. What unseen blessing or hidden tradition might yet shape the Oba's destiny before sunrise? As the first faint glow of dawn brushes the palace rooftops, the courtyard awakens in hushed reverence. Torches extinguished hours ago now yield to the soft light filtering through palm fronds above. You return to the pavilion just before the Oba emerges. The assembled chiefs, drummers, and heralds hold their breath. Your palm leaf notebook hits pages ink-stained from sleepless nights rests in your hand, each line a testament to long hours of preparation. From the inner hall, the Oba's procession steps silently into the clearing. The Oba himself is carried, in a lacquered ivory palanquin, its beams lowered to pass beneath the newly trimmed portico. His attendants, palace eunuchs and coral-studded caps, move with solemn precision, lifting the palanquin at each measured halt to avoid scratching the canopy above. You watch as the carved ivory staff and coral crown, now nested on crimson cushions, catch dawn's light in a gentle shimmer. At your signal, the master drummer strikes the first beat, a slow, deliberate thud that ripples through the onlookers. The herald steps forward, voice low but clear. Hearken now, people of Benin, by the grace of Ioba and ancestors, or by Engabu ascends. 3 times he proclaims the throne name, each repetition louder than the last. The Obo's palanquin lowers to reveal him standing upright, adorned in coral necklace and gold-woven sash. Lifts the ivory staff in his right hand, its carved leopards seeming to prowl at each flicker of torchlight, and places the coral crown upon his head. A ripple of muted gasps sweeps the courtyard as the final bead clicks into place. Immediately, the palace priests step forward. They carry small bowls of crushed camwood blossoms poured only at this sacred moment. In a practiced motion, they scatter the reddish petals over the Oba's hands and shoulders. Each petal falls like blood-tinged rain, symbolizing his bond with earth and forest. The Obier closes his eyes briefly, palms raised, inhaling the heady scent of camwood and cola. You note in the margin, blessing rite completed at minute 3. Behind the priests, a circle of dancers clad in brass anklets and leopard-patterned skirts springs into motion. Their feet, adorned with ringing bells, beat out a staccato rhythm that merges with distant drum echoes. You watch their precise steps forward, one aside mirroring the compass directions. As they sway, they chant praises to the Oba's ancestors, voices threading the morning air. You record dance of the leopard performed flawlessly. Next, you oversee the turning of the altars for eunuchs, each holding a lit candle. Advance in cardinal procession around the Obier east, south, west, and finally north. Upon reaching each altar, they bow and place fresh kola nut, symbols of goodwill and prosperity. The northward altar, empty until now, receives its offerings at last. A hush falls as the Obier raises his staff to each altar in turn, acknowledging the spirits presiding over each direction. In your notebook, altar consecration sequence executed in under 7 minutes. As the final kola nut is laid, the herald calls once more, "Long live the Obier, may his reign be as steady as the river's flow and as enduring as bronze in earth." At this proclamation, benches and cushions reserved for chiefs and dignitaries erupt into soft applause. You allow yourself a discreet nod, satisfied that every meticulous step has led to this triumphant moment. Yet, amid the triumph, your mind flickers to unseen rituals. In a shadowed niche beyond the pavilion, palace sorcerers will shortly perform the Ihi, a silent, nocturnal invocation involving ancestral masks hidden beneath the floorboards. These masks, relics of early Obas, are brought forth only once per coronation, their power whispered to secure the new ruler's spiritual protection. The mask's cracking surfaces, untouched by your cleaning, will soon pulse with ethereal candlelight as incantations rise. You cannot record this rite in your notebook. It is entrusted solely to the palace priests and sorcerers, far from the public eye. With the main ceremonies complete, you guide the Oba through his first audience. Chiefs step forward in rank order to present tribute: bronze plaques, ivory tusks, and fresh kola harvests. You ensure each offering is accepted with measured grace, the Oba's smile forging bonds of loyalty. Your role as protocol officer culminates here, bridging the sacred rites with everyday governance. At midday, as the sun climbs high, the pavilion empties. The Oba and his retinue retire to the private throne hall, the courtyard returning to place imprinting centuries of coronations into its stones. You stand alone by the ancestral shrine, tracing the polished leopards on the platform steps once more. The plaque you polished days ago glows softly in residual torchlight, drawing a final entry in your notebook. **** ceremony, duration, 42 minutes. All procedural targets met. ***, you close its cover. The breeze flicks through palm fronds overhead, scattering a few kola blossoms at your feet. You contemplate the hidden Ihi rites waiting in the shadows, the ancestral masks poised for their brief emergence. Despite every documented detail, some traditions lie beyond the clerk's ledger, entrusted only to oral memory and ritual secrecy in the hush that follows. You reflect on the Oba's coronation rituals, a tapestry woven from polished bronze, coral red, sacred oil, and ancestral whispers. It is a ceremony of visible splendor and invisible power, where the legitimacy of rule hinges on both public spectacle and hidden invocations. And so, as Benin City settles into its afternoon lull, you wonder what murmured words and masked shapes will guide Oba Ekenguda's reign through choices not noted in any record, rituals known only to those who stand in the shadows of the pavilion. You step into the cool, shaded workshop behind the Oba's throne hall, where the air is thick with the scent of freshly cut mahogany and Iroko here. Master carver UFO presides over a dozen apprentices, each seated on low wooden stools before a rough-hewn plank destined to become a palace guardian door. The rafters overhead are draped with drying bundles of red camwood and ebony. Shavings swirl at your feet like autumn leaves. Today you observe the carving of a single door panel, its purpose twofold: to mark the threshold of the inner palace chambers and to serve as a protective emblem against malevolent spirits. UFO's apprentices work in unison. The youngest smooths the plank's surface with Pompheba sanders, while a journeyman traces the design with a bone stylus. UFO himself selects a blunt adze, its iron head darkened by years of use, and begins to chip away the panel's outline. The design is elaborate yet deliberate. At the center sits the figure of a leopard, its carved bristles and open jaws symbolizing vigilance and royal authority. Above the leopard, twin birds likely crowned ibises balance on stylized waves, a nod to the palace's link to river deities. Flanking the edges, vertical rows of interlaced coral beads are etched in shallow relief, echoing the collars worn by Obus of old. By mid-morning, the panel's form begins to emerge. You note the apprentice's tools, adzes of varying sizes, palmwood mallets, iron chisels with rounded tips, and scraping implements fashioned from polished shark teeth. Each tool is catalogued in UFO's ledger according to weight, grain compatibility, and ideal carving angle details you meticulously record in your protocol book. Tool 1, medium adze, 12-inch blade, best for primary outlines. Tool 2, rounded chisel, 6-inch blade, ideal for relief depth adjustment. Tool 3, shark tooth scraper, 4-inch length, for surface finishing. As UFO sculpts the leopard's muscular haunch, you watch him pause to test the wood's responsiveness. He rubs a fingertip along the carved fur, feeling for splintered fibers or uneven gouges when necessary. He taps the wood gently with his mallet, listening for hollow notes that indicate overthining. Each corrective action is followed by a quick grind on a whetstone glazed with palm oil, restoring the chisel's razor edge. The apprentices, meanwhile, prepare the panel's reverse side. Here the design is simpler. Concentric rings and auspicious symbols meant to reflect sound and spirit back into the courtyard. You record their measurements. 4 rings of 2-inch width, separated by 1-inch channels, each channel to be filled later with raw camwood resin tinted red. These resin channels will accentuate the rings when oil is applied at installation. By midday heat, the forward side of the door shows only the faintest remaining roughness. UFO signals for the apprentices to fetch their polishing stones. Flat slabs of fine grit sandstone brought from a quarry near Usiobo. They lay the panel flat on a bed of straw and proceed to rub the sandstone in precise circular motions, the wood dust forming a thin paste that dims the freshly exposed grain with a pale sheen. While they work, you inquire about the workshop's supply chain. From where do these timbers come? Who fells the Iroko trees and transports the planks to the palace? UFO explains that each year, during the early dry season, a detachment of palace foresters travels upriver to a papa forest. There, chosen elders perform a Bubra tree blessing ritual involving kola nut libations and offerings of palm wine to request permission from the forest spirits. Only after the spirits assent do the foresters fell selected trees along the riverbank, marking them with charcoal patterns that guide the ancient log rafts downstream. In your notes, apply ritual, Obiba libation, ceremony by riverbank, seasonal log rafts guided by palace foresters, material Iroko for structural panels, mahogany for relief details. Returning to the carving, a senior apprentice pauses before the leopard's carved teeth. He seeks UFO's approval for the next cut, a shallow underbite that will cast a subtle shadow in torchlight. UFO inspects the draft incisions, nods, and positions the chisel at a precise angle, demonstrating the motion once before handing it back. The apprentice follows UFO's movement exactly, carving a fine shadow groove that gives the leopard's mouth a lifelike depth. As the afternoon wanes, you oversee the final surface treatment, a thin coat of unrefined palm oil rubbed into the carved lines to test how the door will catch the flicker of palace torches. The oil darkens the wood grain, revealing the interplay of light and shadow within each carved motif. You dip a cloth into the oil reservoir, wipe the panel, then stand back. In the warm glow, the leopard's form seems to breathe against the polished surround. Your last concern for the day is the door's hanging mechanism. Palace blacksmiths have forged 2 iron hinges, each shaped like a stylized snake eyes formed by tiny coral inlays. The hinges must be sunk into mortises carved into the door's side, then fastened with iron pegs. You measure hinge placement with a carved ivory gauge, ensuring each hinge sits exactly 1.5 inches from the panel's top and bottom edge for perfect balance. In your protocol book, you pen the final entry of the day. Hinge alignment 1.5 inches from edges. Mortise depth 0.75 inches. Oil test. Satisfactory sheen. Carvings highlighted surface finish. Fine grit sanding complete. Awaiting lacquer layer as dusk falls. You withdraw from the workshop, leaving the panel resting upright against a rafter, its designs gleaming softly in the lantern light. Night winds carried distant drum beats from the palace courtyard, the same drum rhythms that soon will herald the Oba's midnight audiences. In the hush, you reflect on the day's labors, the meticulous carving, the ritual libations, the precise tool cataloging, all facets of a tradition that transforms a simple plank into a guardianship threshold. How many more door panels await this same care, and what stories will their carved figures whisper in the palace's torchlit corridors? In the gray light of early morning, you return to the workshop to find UFO and his senior apprentices already at their stations, the air alive with the soft rasp of metal against wood. Today's focus shifts from carving to the ritual of finishing up, pigments, resins, and sealants that will both protect and embolden the door guardian's visage. You gather around a low table where benches of raw camwood powder, palm oil resin, beeswax lumps, and powdered kaolin clay are arranged in neat bowls. Begins by mixing his stock of red camwood powder with a measure of warm palm oil, stirring it into a thick paste. He dips a slender argolla bristle brush into the mixture and carefully fills the carved coral channel inlays, the pigment seeping into each ravine. You watch the hue deepen from dusty ochre to a muted crimson that will glow faintly under torchlight. Apprentices follow, shading the leopard's mane where fur meets flesh, blending subtle gradations in color. You note in your ledger camwood pigment ratio, 3 parts powder to 2 parts oil. Application tool, argolla bristle brush, 6-inch length. Next, attention turns to the leopard's eyes to recessed ovals, set to receive polished ivory discs. A journeyman brings forward the ivory pieces carved and sanded by palace ivory. Holding each disc over a low charcoal brazier, he warms it slightly to make it malleable, then presses it into the carved socket until it sits flush with the surrounding wood. You lift a lantern for inspection. The ivory catches light like a sliver of moon, giving the leopard an uncanny liveliness. You record ivory inset temperature, 120 degrees Fahrenheit for optimal adhesion. Socket depth, 0.25 inches for flush fit while the pigments dry. Apprentices begin boiling beeswax in a shallow iron pan over a charcoal fire. Once liquid, they brush it over the entire panel surface, sealing the wood grain. The beeswax imparts a soft sheen and repels moisture essential for doors guarding damp corridors near the river. You test the finish by pressing a fingertip into an inconspicuous corner. The wax remains intact, neither too thick nor too brittle. By mid-morning, you note a subtle shift in the workshop's cadence. The soft hum of chanting arises as the palace priests arrive to perform Ogbo Nui, the blessing of the finished carve. You stand respectfully behind a low rope barrier. As for priests in coral-studded, white robes anoint the panel's surface with libations of palm wine mixed with crushed kola nut. Each priest sprinkles a handful of fermented cashew husks at the panel's base, symbols of rooting the carving in ancestral strength. You capture the moment. Ritual name, Ogbo Nui, blessing of the carved image. Libation mixture, 2 parts palm wine to 1 part kola infusion husk offering, 3 handfuls per priest. Watching the priests retire, you guide the apprentices in attaching the iron stake hinges. They chisel delicate mortises on the panel's left side, then insert the hinges straps, securing each with tapered iron pegs. The straps echo the panel's carved snakes, their eyes of coral glinting against soot-black metal. You verify. Peg length, 1.25 inches. Diameter, 0.25 inches. Mortise depth, 0.75 inches. Width matches strap thickness. By late afternoon, UFO stands before the completed guardian door, eyes narrowed in satisfaction. You sweep away stray wood dust, and inspect every detail, each coral bead channel, every ivory eye inset, the polished beeswax sheen. You record final metrics. Overall dimensions, 6 feet high times 3 feet wide. Weight, approximately 120 pounds. Completion time, 5 days. 2 hours. As the sun shifts low, you oversee the careful transport of the panel to the palace's west entry. Bearers lift the door onto a pair of padded wooden trolleys and wheel it across flagstones worn smooth by centuries of foot traffic. Palace officials pause to admire the vivid camwood channels and the leopard's alert posture, anticipating how the carving will ward the palace chambers at night. In your private chambers, you reflect on the rhythms of the workshop, the chants, the carving, the blessings, the pigment mixing, all woven into a tapestry of craft and ceremony. Yet you know that tomorrow, another door panel will be brought in, and the cycle repeats. The workshop hums with a quiet urgency, balancing tradition and innovation in each new guardian created. What deeper symbolism lies hidden within these carved forms, meanings known only to those initiated in the palace's secret rites. Dawn's golden light filters through the gauze of the palace archway as the final guardian door is hoisted into place. The palace smiths lean and steady, guide the iron snake hinges into their ancient sockets carved into the west entry. The door swings on its weighted pins with a low, resonant creak, an oral testament to the precise mortise depths and pegs you logged. You stand aside, inked notebook in hand, eyes tracing every joint, every seam. Once aligned, the smiths secure the hinges with a final tap of their palmwood mallets, each strike deliberate, measured. You record hinge test swings, 5 forward, 5 back, no binding hinge, peg torque, uniform resistance at third mallet hit. Next, palace carpenters insert a carved ebony threshold to support the door's weight and protect the lower panel from moisture. The ebony strip, inlaid with thin brass fillets, slips into a channel cut across the stone floor. Apprentices pour a slurry of palm oil resin and kaolin clay into the channel, sealing it against drafts and rodent entry. You verify. Threshold seal, cure time, 2 hours to full hardness. Reason to clay ratio, 2:1 as the threshold sets. The Orber's personal guards gather outside, spears planted in the sand. Your nod, you signal the door's formal inauguration. A lone drummer steps forward, palm held palm downward over his drum, and begins a slow heartbeat rhythm. The guards stand at attention. The door, not yet bearing any name plaque, becomes the moment's focal point. The herald, resplendent in coral-trimmed attire, advances and proclaims, by the grace of Ioba's wisdom, let this door of the leopard stand eternal, warding our king's halls and spirits both seen and unseen. With that, the OBA himself emerges, coral-crowned, shimmering, and steps toward the new threshold. He lays a single coral bead into a carved recess at the door's center. An act you quickly note, royal bead placement, leopard's third forehead, rich symbolic meaning, Oba's personal blessing. A gentle rain of cola blossom petals drifts from balcony rosettes above, settling on the door's seal and threshold. Apprentices quickly brush the petals aside, careful not to disturb the resin. You log petal clearance time, 30 seconds per apprentice. The OBA then tests the door himself, pushing it with the soft palm of his hand. It swings open without friction and closes with a satisfying hush, neither slam nor squeak. With a nod of approval, he strides past into the inner palace, leaving the door swinging slightly ajar as a silent sentinel. You step forward to inspect the final details under the new morning light. That camwood inlays glow a deep crimson. The ivory eyes of the leopard catch stray sunbeams, and the beeswax finish imparts a gentle sheen. You run your finger along the carved waves, marveling at how the relief alternates shadows and light. Your last entry's read. Final function test passed, no squeak, even under weight shift. Aesthetic check. Pigment saturation and sheen verified. As you close your notebook, you reflect on the door's dual role, a physical barrier and a spiritual guardian. Its creation fused practical woodworking, ritual blessing, pigment alchemy, and royal ceremony. Yet beyond the recorded metrics, you know palace lore whispers of hidden charms. Beneath the threshold lies a secret cache of beads and prayers placed by the palace sorcerers to draw away ill intent. You will never see these tokens, nor can you note their presence in any official record, yet their power is woven into every swing of the door. The courtyard bustles again as guards resume their patrols and courtiers hurry to morning audiences, but for a moment, you stand alone before the panel, imagining the unseen rites that guard this guardian, whispered invocations hidden behind the carved leopard, ancestral masks held in dark corners, and blessings murmured only at midnight. You breathe in the dawn air and realize that while your notebook captures the door's every technical detail, the true magic lies in the unspoken traditions passed down through shadowed workshop halls. As the palace stirs to life, you ponder what unrecorded rituals and secret charms ensure the leopard's watch endures beyond any written record, safeguarding Benin's heart in ways no envoy ever logs. You arrive before the palace's ivory-fenced courtyard just as a morning bugle echoes from the brass-topped gatehouses. Beyond the gate, 2 eunuchs in muted coral-trimmed tunics stand sentinel, their bearing poised between soldierly discipline and courtly decorum. They carry no spears. Instead, each bears a polished wooden staff tipped with a brass serpent header, the symbol of their unique authority and loyalty to the Orba. As you pass beneath the lintel emblazoned with ancestral motifs, you are aware of their watchful eyes, trained in subtlety and discretion. In the palace's inner corridor, the eunuchs' quarters occupy a side wing adjacent to the Orba's private library. Here, walls are hung with woven palm leaf mats detailing royal genealogies, and low wooden chests store the silver seals used to authenticate palace decrees. The eunuchs, having been inducted through a combination of voluntary service and imperial appointment, manage these sacred seals and serve as gatekeepers to the Orba's correspondence, controlling the flow of petitions and foreign envoys' requests. You are guided to meet Chief Eunuch Igbenosa, a veteran of 4 Obas who wears a simplified coral collar and an anklet of carved ivory beads. His countenance is calm, eyes practiced in reading tone and gesture. As you take a seat on a woven straw mat opposite him, he pours you palm wine from a carved gourd and motions for you to record his opening remarks. The Oba grants me 3 duties: to hold his secrets, to guard his confidence, and to shape courtly counsel through silence. He unfolds a narrow parchment roll and unseals the day's audience list. Among the names are provincial chiefs, hierarchy of palace wives, and visiting Portuguese traders. The order of presentation: who waits, who proceeds, rests solely in the eunuch's hands. You note, audience scheduling, drafted by eunuchs, finalized by the Oba's nodseal custody. 3 seals, each for domestic orders, foreign correspondence, and financial edicts. As the morning sun climbs, you observe Igbenosa dispatch 2 junior eunuchs bearing sealed letters to the town's governor in Usulu and the ivory trader near the riverfront. Their steps are measured, robes rustling like soft drumbeats. Each letter carries the Oba's crest in red camwood pigment and the eunuch's personal mark in indigo-dyed wax. Turning to you, Igbenosa explains the process. Fresh parchment is cut from goat-hide scrolls, submerged in a bath of boiled kyalan and honey to create a smooth writing surface, then dried on low racks. Scribes in palace service inscribe the text with thin reed quills dipped in lampblack ink. Eunuchs then affix the seals, nod to confirm authenticity, and dispatch the letters by coursers or royal messengers. You ask about the eunuch's own privileges. Igbenosa smiles mildly. We answer only to the OBA, subsisting on palace rations of pounded yam and smoked fish. We live apart from our families, bound by oath and blade, one cut that seals both our office and our silence. He gestures to a low shelf where curved bronze blades rest, each inscription marking a eunuch's oath. Once blade meets flesh, no personal kinship may bind them against the OBA. You record oath blade ritual, single ceremony, blade kept in eunuch quarters, palace ration, daily yam, fish, palm oil, monthly allowance of kola nuts at mid-morning. You accompany the eunuchs to the council hall, where advisors await behind a low wooden screen. Igbenosa taps a small bronze belfry, note summoning the OBA. The eunuchs then step forward to present petitions, a request for additional grain levies, and a report on ivory shipments. They bow, then retire behind the screen, leaving councillors to speak freely once the OBA is seated. From your vantage, you see how ministers glance furtively toward the screen, aware that the eunuchs listen even in apparent absence. Their presence alone guides discourse. No minister dares oppose too sharply, lest the eunuch carry reports to the Oba's ear. You note council dynamics. Eunuchs unseen oversight tempers debate reporting chain. Ministers gives Oba via sealed ledger entries as the council session begins. You reflect on the eunuch's paradox. Though barred from family and personal advancement, they wield immense influence, shaping policy by filtering information and scheduling audiences. Their power derives less from arms or title, and more from unseen channels of trust. What unspoken judgments and carefully weighed silences shape the policies born in this hall. Guided by eunuch hands, you return to the eunuch quarters just after midday, when the scent of smoked fish mingles with warm straw. Chief Eunuch Igbenosa sits upon a low bench beside a narrow ochrewood table, reviewing the ornate ledger where petitions are logged. Junior eunuchs stand at attention, their robes neatly pleated and coral collars aligned. As you settle on a mat, Igbenosa offers a small bowl of palm kernels, stew thick, subtly spiced, and sustaining after the morning's duties. You jot down stew ingredients: palm kernel paste, dried catfish flakes, ground agusi, seeds. Meal timing: midday ration, served at 11:30 a.m. Between spoonfuls, Igbenosa explains the daily ritual of cipher preparation. Each evening, he convenes with palace scribes to compose secret memoranda encrypted with shifting coral ink symbols to guide the Oba's decisions at dawn. The cipher, a matrix of coral red squares and soot-black dots, changes monthly. Should a seal-bearing letter misalign, the Oba's own seal will refuse to adhere, signaling a forgery or misstep. You record cipher renewal: first new moon of each month, coral ink formula, camwood powder, tamarind juice, water. Forgery check: misaligned seal adhesion rate 1% as shadows lengthen in the quarters. Igbenosa rises and retrieves a covered basket. Inside lie folded cloths of indigo-dyed linen, dignified badges worn by junior eunuchs when escorting sensitive envoys. He unfolds one cloth, revealing its precise weave: 12 threads per inch, alternating light and dark indigo. Each cloth is blessed by palace priests to grant subtle invisibility so envoys speak their minds more freely in the eunuch's company. You note, cloth weave 12 TPI, indigo mordant bath repeated thrice, blessing ritual, perfume of frankincense, recitation, O spirit of silence. Later, you accompany Igbenosa to the Hall of Seals. Here, a low stone pedestal holds 3 bell metal seals, each embossed with the Oba's face in profile. Light from a single lantern flickers against the seals, their surfaces etched with the month's cipher border. A junior eunuch carefully lifts each seal by its ivory handle, dips it in crimson camwood ink, and presses it into the wax matrix of 3 waiting documents. With each press, the council's edicts and foreign treaties receive their final authentication. You record seal dimensions 2 inches diameter, 0.25-inch depth, ink viscosity, 5 poise at 80 degrees Fahrenheit for crisp impressions as evening approaches. Gather once more in the quarters for the Igor Eberuth, a whispered council ritual. By lamplight, they remove their robes, don lighter linen shifts, and sit cross-legged around a low brazier. A single brass bowl of kola nut pieces rests at the circle's center. Each eunuch in turn offers a kola piece and softly recounts which troubling rumor overheard that day within the palace walls. Chief eunuch listens, weighing each tidbit before recording it in a slim ivory notebook evidence. He says, for the Oba's silent wisdom, you note, ritual time, 6 p.m. daily bowl contents, 20 kola pieces. Each piece yields 1 concerned notebook size, 9 4 inches. 80 ivory folios. You ask about the ritual's purpose. Igbenosa explains, the Oba cannot be everywhere. Our whispered counsel brings his attention to matters unspoken in council. These whispers shape unseen guidance. You watch the junior eunuchs exchange furtive glances, each mindful of how a single whispered rumor may alter palace policy the next day. As the brazier's embers glow red, you close your notebook. You've witnessed how the eunuch's power grows not from overt decree, but from secret ciphers, blessings, and whispered counsel. Their daily rituals bind palace intrigue into ordered patterns, ensuring the Oba's rule stands firm on a foundation of silent discretion, which unspoken truths carried by the kola nuts will tomorrow's council heed, and which will vanish into the hush of palace corridors. That night, a hush settles over the palace as torches gutter along the coral-stitched halls. You slip back to the eunuch quarters one final time, drawn by the faint glow of a single lantern behind latticework shutters. Inside, Chief Eunuch Igbenosa stands before his private writing table, a low ochrewood slab polished smooth by decades of ritual use. The ivory notebook from last night lies open, its pages filled with whispered concerns. A distant provinces, grain shortage, a foreign envoy's dubious gift, a courtier's secret lineage question. He selects a fresh sheet of parchment, rendered from goat hide, and performs the Ozogbina, silent invocation, written in soot-black ink along the margins. The invocation calls upon ancestral spirits to refine judgment and discern falsehood from truth. You note, invocation text length, 12 syllables per invocation, lining ratio, 3 parts lamplight to 1 part pomoil bundawans. The invocation is complete. Igbenosa reviews the gathered whispers and arranges them into 3 categories: urgent, advisory, and deferred. Each category receives a distinct coral ink annotation in the margina. For urgent, a dash for advisory, and an open square for deferred. He then seals the annotated parchment within a reedbark tube wrapped in indigo linen, affixing it with a domestic seal. This tube is not dispatched. Rather, it is placed beside the Oba's evening stool in the inner council chamber, ready for his eyes at first light. You record category symbols, dot, dash, open square dispatch method, hand placed beside Oba's stool. Meanwhile, junior eunuchs prepare the Igor Iberu bowl for tomorrow's whispered council, ensuring each kola piece is smooth and evenly sized. One eunuch quietly confides to you that, rarely due to concerns, receive the same symbol. Each whisper is uniquely weighed. You pause to write average whispers per night, 7 to 12 symbol frequency, urgent approximately 2, advisory approximately 4, deferred 3 at dawn's first glow. You join Igbenosa inside the council hall. The OBA, seated upon a low ivory stool, motions for the chief eunuch to step forward. With solemn formality, Igbenosa removes the reedbark tube and hands it to the Oba, bowing deeply. The Oba cracks the tube open, unfolds the parchment, and studies the ivory inscriptions and coral symbols in silence. Courtiers watch from recessed alcoves. Even the Brassfin council lances seem to lower in deference. You sense the weight of this moment from whispered rumors. Categorized by eunuch hands, arises the Oba's first guidance of the day. The Oba's finger traces a dot symbol beside the grain shortage, whisper an immediate decree for relief shipments. He glances at the envoy's dubious gift notation, a dash signaling caution but not outright rejection. Finally, he folds the parchment and returns it to Igbenosa, whose steady hand receives it without words. You log Oba's initial response time, 3 minutes. Decree dispatch method. Eunuch carried reed tube to palace messengers. Morning audiences begin. You reflect on how eunuch ritual intertwines with royal decision-making. Their daily crafting, seal-bearing, whispered counsel shapes policy unseen, guiding the OBA with silent precision. No courtier sees the full ledger of whispers. Only the eunuchs in the OBA share that intimate knowledge. Later, when you return to the quarters, the brazier's embers have cooled. Junior eunuchs prepare to rest, their duty cycle complete for the night. You gather your notes and consider the eunuch's paradoxical power, bound by oath and blade, yet entrusted with the kingdom's deepest confidences. As you step back into the palace courtyard, the scent of wet earth from the morning dew mingles with lingering incense from yesterday's blessings. You carry with you a final thought. True power in Benin's court rests not in the blade or the seal alone, but in the silent channels of trust carved by the eunuch's whispered counsel. With that, you close your notebook and depart, leaving the palace's heart guarded by those who speak least, yet guide most.